recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. No, it's not. Howdy, folks. Double J here. That's right. That's JEFF, That's Double J, JArrett, the world's greatest singer, the world's greatest entertainer, and the world's greatest wrestler. Oh, folks, we're going to take a step back in time. So you know how Conrad, he really gave me a hard time for about a year, and more or less rightly so. I was having a lot of issues here in Hendersonville. No, it wasn't the Fred Flintstone farm here, but it was close. We often had internet issues, but we got all that worked out. And as luck would have it, this week, the Podfather, yeah, he might have been on the beach, but that's not the issue. He might be basking in all his glory with an Alabama win. Feels like the Roll Tide is back on course. But no, at the Radisson, as they call it, he's having some internet issues, and we tried to work it out off and on all day long. As I'm recording this, it is Monday, September the 25th. So this drops in the morning for our ad-free folks. It's going to drop as soon as the producer extraordinaire, Mr. Marcus, can get this out. But I do apologize. But what we're going to do today is something that has been right up on the very tip top of my list and Conrad's list, because we from time to time we have these kind of situations, and sometimes my schedule out on the road, being the last outlaw, working with AEW, sometimes I just can't get back here to the studio. And same with Conrad. You know, he does a few podcasts himself, as well as run his day business and night business and a little bit everything in between. But today, we're going to go back in time, and I spelled my name up top for a couple of reasons. One, to aggravate Conrad, because when he hears this, he's just going to grin and hate me again, like he did way back in the day. But no, the Double J character, it was launched into 93, early 94. But we're going to go back and talk about a guy that's very special and near and dear to my heart. We lost him in March of 2022. And I'll never really forget where I was at. I knew he was having a rough go, and a very very tough time. But I was actually on vacation with my family when the word came out, and maybe in hindsight, that's exactly where I needed to be, because I was at the beach and it was cold, but I stood out on and watched the waves come in and reminisced about old Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, as we'll refer to him often during this podcast, how special he was to my career. Scott came into Tennessee late 80s, worked for my father. That's the first time I met Scott, and then watched him when I was still in the territory system. But I watched him in WCW, and then when he really came on the scene as Razor Ramon, and he did those first couple of programs with Macho Man and as we know, oozing charisma. But the character just really took off. It skyrocketed very, very quick. And as we all know, that was really the rocket launch that put Scott on a trajectory that from Razor Ramon and then back to WCW as a part of NWO. And I won't go into all that, but he set records in a lot of ways. They broke the mold on talent contracts. Him and my bud, Kevin Nash, podcast family member, click this. But no, so we're going to go back and look at early 1995 today. The first kind of part of this is going to go to Royal Rumble, Tampa, Florida. I recently just wrestled in that building and got to tell a few stories of some guys. They were just shaking their head in 1995. And here I was on Dynamite 200 and wrestling Kenny Omega. in a 6-man tag. But that's another story, another podcast. But it's really, really cool. But Royal Rumble 1995 in Tampa, Florida. And then we're going to go on to the showcase of the Immortals, WrestleMania 11, where Road Dogg was in my corner. 1, 2, 3 Kid, Xbox, 6-Pac was in Scott's corner. Hartford, Connecticut. We're going to go down the road of WrestleMania 11. It's a really, really cool time in my career. We're going to get really deep into the story behind the story on my feud and friendship with Scott Hall. I love so much doing my world. I hate to say this. I miss Conrad this week, but he'll be back. We will be back next week. So for this week, we don't get to talk college football. I don't get to bash my good old buddy Chris Park, a.k.a. the Monster Abyss. Man, we both had so much material ready for him. We don't get to talk about WrestleQuest this week. The game is red hot. Super excited about that. Springfield Lucky Horseshoes. Got a lot going on with the minor league baseball. We're looking at a couple other teams. So I don't get to kibitz and chat with Connie this week. I get to just bash him. And one final thing. Today's episode, as I've talked about, it's Royal Rumble 95, WrestleMania 11, 1995. But also a little special treat. Folks, I'm doing the ad reads today. So A, have patience with me. B, man, I'd love to see a spike. This would nothing more than just aggravate. I mean, aggravate Conrad to no end. If, the advertisers and the buyers go, hey, that week of September the 25th. Yeah. Like, what did y'all do that was so unique? What was so special? What in the, how did the ad reads? I mean, did you guys do double ad reads or triple ad reads? And of course, my man Dave Green will say, no, just a lot of chatter. It was a lot of chatter from the right guy. That's right, the last outlaw. So no, all kidding aside, we're going to have fun today, going back in time. Again, have patience with me, doing some fun ad reads, and they won't be as good as Connie, but we will be back next week and get to aggravate one another, chat, talk football, pro football, college football. Damn, I'm glad we're not talking to Conrad this week about my Titans, but lots going on around the world of professional wrestling. I'm headed out to Denver for Dynamite. A really cool pay-per-view this weekend, Wrestle Dream. One thing about this business, and it's something that, my grandfather, we often talk about my mentor, Teeny, Christine JArrett, my dad's mother, but on the other side of my family, the only grandfather I ever had, Eddie Marlin, he would ride up down the road with a big chew of tobacco in his jaw. And I'd sit over there, and back in the day, I'd kind of sip on my beer, but I would ride along with him and he would tell stories. And he often had different one-liners, but he would often say, if you don't like today's wrestling business, don't worry about it. Wake up tomorrow. It's going to be different. It's always changed. So lots of change going on in the world. Super excited about things to come. But folks, let's go back in time. The story behind the story. This episode is my man, Razor Ramon. Scott Hall.
But today we're talking about the Royal Rumble 1995. Wow. And this is a big show for you. It's, I believe, the first time you win the Intercontinental Championship, which is obviously a big opportunity for you. And the story of you and Razor Ramon, the real life Scott Hall, actually begins at your Madison Square Garden debut, January 17th. Now that's back in 1994. And at the time, Razor is the IC champ, and he's going to defeat you by DQ when Shawn Michaels interferes. Is this around the same time you were inducted into the clique? Do I have that right?
Here we go. I tell you what, I looked at the notes, and it caught me off guard a little bit that research went all the way back to literally the year before Rumble 95. So January, I had just started with the company, 3 months, or December, the vignettes were airing. So I debuted in December, and here we are less than a month later, and I'm in Madison Square Garden. And look, when Razor was rolled out, and he did that program with Macho Man. I loved it. Now, me and Scott had worked Tennessee territory for my dad. He'd come down, used to drive this old Corvette. So he's a big 6'6", 280 guy, driving up and down the roads to Memphis, Louisville, and Evansville in an old Corvette. But that was the first time that I was around Scott. But and then the Diamond Stud, I watched on TV from WCW. But when he clicked with I was a huge fan. I just thought the marketability and how Scott, portrayed it. And then here we go, Double J vignettes there. And next thing you know, and that's back in the days where we got printed booking sheets. Oh, you're in the Garden against Razor and an IC title. I'm like, wow. Not only payday, but just the placement on the card.
At the time, he's probably a top 3 babyface.
Oh, for sure. But this was sort of the beginning that, the vignettes aired, and then all of a sudden, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but all of 94, we did a lot of trips overseas. And this is where, and look, I'd known Sean since 88 in Tennessee. I met Kevin. I just met Kevin, but this is where we spent a lot of time together riding buses and cars overseas on all the buses after the shows. You're supposed to be heels and baby faces, but we would always end up on the same bus. So lots of bus trips, and the 4 of us just did a lot of traveling together.
And before you know it, you're
pre-click days to answer your question.
What's that?
It's pre-click days. There was no click at this time. It's pre-click, as you took another dig, Horseman.
I know you had spent a little bit of time with him in Memphis, but did you get an opportunity to wrestle him when he was in through Memphis, or is this really the first time y'all are hooking up?
Scott?
Yeah.
Maybe we were both baby faces. I feel like maybe we were tag partners once or twice, but nothing of substance.
So when you have your big match at Madison Square Garden, obviously a big moment in your career, you'd worked in big buildings before. I mean, the Mid-South Coliseum was a big building, but that's really in your backyard and doesn't have the mystique of a Madison Square Garden. Is this something that, you're excited to talk about with real life friends and family? I mean, wrestling in Madison Square Garden has got to be on a bucket list for a lot of wrestlers, right?
It was definitely on my bucket list, growing up, NBA fan and Knicks and and you hear through the music industry. But Mid-South Coliseum sellout was 11,800. So let's just say it seats 12,000 folks. The Garden's over 20. So much bigger building and the layout, but the rumble of the crowd. And look, I had heard from the time I was 10, 11, 12 years old, Memphis is our big building, and the Omni was a really big building. And in my brain, before I got into the Sportatorium, Dallas Sportatorium was a big building. But, you talk about Olympic Auditorium in LA, but, you hear Boston Garden, but the Garden is the Garden. No parallel. It's just the Mecca. And Vince Sr. and him promoting shows in there. And look, it's where, so many events have happened. Bruno and the consecutive sellouts, and Arnie throwing in the towel and on for Iron Sheik, and that story, and Hulkamania. And then here I am, 25, 26 years old, and I'm at the top, not at the top, but up close to it. And for the IC title against a guy that I knew, Scott, but his character was over. And I'm like, I got to bring my working boots. I got to bring my A game. Like, I got nervous last night, Conrad, but it's a whole nother level of nervous when you're 24, 25 and knowing that Vince is standing at the curtain, knowing that it can't be good. It's got to be great. So a lot of pressure.
So from there, you're actually going to get to work Razor a few more times during the year, including a Raw that was taped in April. And it's the first time you have your big flashy entrance, and you originally work a match with him, and I guess something didn't go as planned. So you guys have to come out later and fix some things. What do you remember of that? Is this just you guys don't have your chemistry together yet, or what can you tell us about having to go out and
I wish I could recall, but it could be something along the lines of Pat Patterson wanted us to, not that we screwed something up, but hey, go try this. It may work better. That finish didn't work. Or, hey, we need to fix this or something in the truck, or hey, it's stunk, guys. You got to go back and do this. I'm not exactly sure. It was not, to my best of my knowledge, we used to do in those days, in between tape changes where it was, it's not a raw, it's a raw taping, but maybe we did multiple that night, but Coliseum home video. And that's a payday. That's an extra payday. So it could have been something that they wanted to enhance, make better, something for Coliseum home video. My gut tells me Pat wanted to, either we didn't do something he liked, or he wanted to try something a little different, and we went out and did it.
The word we've heard over the years is that once upon a time, Vince McMahon had a bit of a meltdown and required for a Saturday night's main event that the Macho Man and Ric Flair go retape something. And it was quite the story. To the best of your recollection, that never happened with Vince, but perhaps Pat wanted to just try something different, but it wasn't a pissed off, fun Vince McMahon story we can share, right?
No, I don't. I think I would remember that. I don't think this is the night that they ribbed me. Oh no. So Roadie, what is in there? They ribbed me and Roadie one night. That's the following year, put us in a shark cage. And held it up above the ring for a couple of matches that Bruce Pritchard was a part of. But no, I would have remembered if it was an ass chewing from Vince, or even if it was really an ass chewing from Pat, or something that he was really upset about. If my gut tells me it was, hey, that was good, Coliseum home video, we might need a little more time, because some of us as talent who might have been on the road, they'd tell us to go 10 and we'd go 9, maybe 8, but no, so they legitimately might have said, hey man, we didn't get enough time. Go out, get some heat on Scott for 2 or 3 minutes, and then do the same finish, tweak this, tweak that. And now that'll give us time to fill for the Coliseum home video. I really don't remember.
How well did you adapt to this flashy ring entrance? You had not really had a big, I don't know, to do like this before in your career. And now you've got this sort of over the top ring entrance. Are you excited about this because it's a sign the company's putting some resources behind you, or are you like
just the lighting, all the lighting and all that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, look, from the very first time, I don't believe I saw one WrestleMania 1, but maybe 2, certainly 3. But I was mesmerized by WWE's production values always. And every year a little bit different, and this and that. And, those superstar tapings, and they would just be on a platform, and the way they'd shoot it, and all the full arena behind it, the snake pit, Piper's Pit, just all those kind of things. I always thought it was just super cool. And then, get there and superstars and challenge, and, just all the little intricacies that WWE there's such a cut above everybody else. They refined it. And, Vince is a visionary, but his vision for a television show, he's a trendsetter in so many ways. Look, it may not be his original idea, but he always takes ideas and makes them better, makes them more marketable in a lot of ways. Just the lighting effect, you go, okay, they're spending money, and the lighting director would come to you, and the director and all that, and here's how we're going to do it. It meant, okay, this is a part of your push. We're adding to your production value.
So I should mention that Diesel gets hurt in late May and early June. So you're going to substitute for him, as he's the Intercontinental Champion at the time, and you end up putting Scott over. Did you know at this point, or think at this point, it might be setting up for a run with you and Razor for the IC?
No, it was still, building blocks, and I can't remember all the different opponents, but for the most part, I do remember Doink. So again, it was wins and losses on live events. I was putting over baby faces, but in heels, it was the slow. And I've told this on the podcast, Vince saying, we're going to build you this next year in early 94. And I'm like, year, but okay, I got it. And as every TV and month went along, you can just sort of see the build and the build and the build. But I had no idea, because we're talking May, June, and Kevin had something wrong with his heel. Man, we were running and gunning and lots of travel. Like I said, lots of international. So I think that was when he had some heel issues. But yeah, I had no idea that we're talking IC title slot. All right, folks. Hope you're enjoying this episode talking about my man, Scott Hall. But again, let's take a time out. And that's a little nice segue because we're about to talk about my favorite brand new sports app. It's a ticketing app. It's called GameTime.co. Folks, that's right, GameTime.co. And I'm going to tell you all about how to get it in a minute. But, I want to tell you that this is my personal experience about all this stuff. Buddy of mine, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and this is when I wish Game Time was around. It was a last minute deal. It was a Sunday. It was the late game here in town. And he said, hey man, let's just go. We can get tickets. And it's one of those wacky weekends where I had it available. We went. I said, do you know where the seats are? And he said, oh, they're great seats. They're great seats. My buddy gave them to him. Well, I said, are you sure? Because I know my buddy. Well, lo and behold, had I had Game Time, I would have been able to see the exact view, but I didn't, and they ended up being way up in the top, and I would have given him a politely no. But folks, that's what Game Time is all about. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat. It's really the best price guaranteed. Game Time literally takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. It's when I tell you it's easy to find and buy tickets for every event, I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. So folks, get the Game Time app right now. And I'm telling you, when I tell you they're obsessed, I mean obsessed with saving you money. They'll give you deals right up to the start of the event, the game, whatever it is. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with zone deals, you pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings, folks. It's almost 20% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. That's right. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 100%. Matter of fact, 110% of the difference right into your action. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code MyWorld. That's MyWorld for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with your code. Spell it out. MyWorld, folks. MyWorld. That's MyWorld for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Folks, let's get back to the podcast.
We've all heard the stories of Scott Hall and his issues later on in his career, but at this time, how was Scott to work with? Was he giving as a worker? I mean, did you guys click? Or just talk to me about you guys work together here.
Scott's always when it came showtime. I've never had an experience, so I know there is, but I mean, he is so dialed in to the subtleties of the industry and the subtleties of character development and the subtleties of a match. Lots of the, it's a Pat Patterson mindset that Pat obviously shared with Scott and Sean and others, but Scott is a thinker, and, long road trips, when you start fine tuning and, we got in the groove coming up this year where, you can have a B and a C match, and A is for when you got to go, and B is sort of saving some bumps on your bump card, and C is really saving them. So learning how to work smarter. Scott was a huge influence on me about learning how to work smarter, and it's not lesser, it's not being lazy, it's just working smarter, because some, we'll call them C-towns, that get wrestling once a year. You don't have to do as many different things. You want to tell your story with the same impact, but you're taking care of your body a little bit better. So Scott, and it's obviously it's well documented on how good he was behind the scenes, and I completely concur.
So let's talk about how they're keeping you guys apart, really, from any sort of one-on-one action in the ring until later in the year. Of course, we're talking about 1994. The beginning of the build really has you as an afterthought. by the end of October, it's announced that the bad guys, as we're getting ready for Survivor Series, is going to be Razor Ramon, 123 Kid, Davey Boy, and the new Head Shrinkers. And they're going to take on the Teamsters, which is Diesel, Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, Jim Neidhart, and yourself. When this is put together, did you know the plan was to eventually you and Razor pair off?
Had no idea. The Teamsters were the Survivor Series. Excuse me. A little hoarse from last night. Survivor Series where Chuck Norris took my head off. But no, it was a build. At this time, they were building Kevin. They were building Diesel. He was Shawn Michaels' muscle. Probably during the summer is when Vince was like, I want him as a baby face, and we're going to go with it. Well, Vince probably thought that from day one, but he's like, we're going to bake this, and he's going to be Shawn's heater for a while, but we're going to build it. But I had no idea that they were heading in that, I guess it was Brett and Backlund were doing their deal. And so that would have been 94 coming off Owen and Brett and Neidhart teaming up. So no, there was no, I wasn't aware of the plans for Rumble 95 at this point.
October 19th at a Wrestling Challenge taping, Razor Ramon with Ranger Danger, who's a local television personality, pinned you with the Razor's Edge. Of course, you were originally going to win the match by countout, but when you find out you can't win the title, you challenge him to keep the match going so you can win the championship. That's a little old school Memphis right there, is it not?
You know what? A lot of people have discussed that. A lot of that, I mean, I like to say it's maybe a little old school Memphis with some dash of Pat Patterson psychology just thrown in there and how the timing of it was. But obviously this is setting up for Rumble 95, but again, all about the storytelling. Completely, how do we tell this story? Which, in a lot of ways, Conrad, last night, I sat back and tried to analyze all of that because a lot of new fans tuning in to a product. Okay, what is the story? They don't understand all the high flying and this and that. Like, what's the story? What's this character, wrestler A versus wrestler B? So when I go back and we're talking about, 94, it's okay, they're going to tune in. Jeff Double J, country music singer, but he's a wrestler, and the bad guy is a brawler, so he's going to out wrestle him. And Pat would know how to craft these kind of stories.
You work with Scott on a Canadian loop in late October, and you're putting him over at the Montreal Forum. Big show for you guys at the time. You've got 15,534 paid, and then in Halifax, he's going to reverse a figure 4 into a small package. This is what this is, right? You guys getting reps together, preparing for the big show.
Yeah. And I wish I knew what was on top. If I would have had time today, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Do you know, Conrad, what was on top? Because look, in 94, live event business in WWE, we were putting the building blocks. And I can vividly remember that early in that year, hearing a couple of different outfit folks and say, look, we're going to add one or two international, being smart about business and smart about profits. We're going to add a couple of international tours. This is the year that I got to spend Easter Sunday in Jerusalem with Owen and 123 Kid and Kyoto and others. Excuse me, Conrad. But we were adding international tours, guaranteed money, but we were also looking at, we're going to go to the Garden once a quarter. We're going to go to Nassau. We're going to go to Meadowlands once a quarter. We're going to do Pittsburgh once a quarter. All the big markets. Vince was trying to, if I remember correctly, basically the big live event markets, he wanted to build revenue there. We were doing Raw on the road, so let's use the maybe B and C markets, the Bushkills and smaller TV markets to do Raws, the Poughkeepsies of the world. This Canadian tour you're talking about, we popped a hell of a house. And I want to say Jacques Rougeau, I don't call it his retirement.
Yes, you're exactly right. It was marketed as his retirement match. He's in the main event, beating up the Pirate. Jacques Rougeau had Raymond in his corner, And PCO had Johnny Polo, aka Scott Levy, aka Raven.
PCO, he was there last night. Unbelievable. Yeah.
And Scott Levy's last appearance here. So this will be the last time we see Raven until 2000. So Raven's last shot. But underneath that, it was Diesel working with Barbarian, Undertaker, and Yoko. Brett working with Jim Neidhart. IRS with Bob Holly. The Bushwhackers with Well Done. Atom Bomb with Quang or Quang, depending on how Bruce pronounces it today. And you and Jeff, or you're Jeff, you and Razor.
Yeah.
So either way, though, old Jacques was quite a draw. 16,843 fans are there. 15,534 are paid. This is Montreal. Just to put this in perspective, 2 nights later, they run Toronto, which is like the New York City of Canada. 3,500 folks.
Okay. Thank you. Folks, that right there is why he's the podfather, because it completely gives the whole context about, and I just sort of went into the 94 live event business. We were building it. And I can remember going to Pittsburgh and Jack Lanza going, "Hey man, this call will be fun tonight. Got to call the old man. We're up 40 grand," or, the building blocks or whatever it was. We were slowly building the live event business back up, coming off the steroid year and the scandal. And, I'll say this, it was leaving Hulkamania and getting into Brett and Sean and all the, those top guys. So it was a transition period during the industry. But then it truly shows in so vividly. If you promote and you give them what they want to see, they'll be there. I don't care if it's a downtime, a up, down, whatever it is. Jacques got off his ass and probably pulled out all the strings and promoted. And the Rougeau name in that market was mega strong. And it was a hell of a house because it was way above what else we were drawing around the loops.
Almost 5X. Part of that Canadian tour, without Bret Hart on the shows like Brandon, Manitoba, and Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, it's actually got you and Scott in the main event.
Mm-hmm.
This has got to be a huge vote of confidence for you, an old Memphis boy. Now you're here in the big leagues working with a top 3 babyface and going on last. Pretty big time stuff.
Hey, tell me about it. It was, what am I, 27 there? How old am I? Yeah, not even that. 26, 27. It was a big deal. Yes, Conrad. And I can remember it going, man, this has happened kind of quick. And, Brett was carrying the banner and he had no off days because he was, champ or in that slot and doing every appearance and just so much groundwork to be done and pulled in 15 different directions. So yeah, it was cool. And yep, it was a big vote of confidence from VKM, to say the least.
So the big push for Survivor Series comes at the end of Monday Night Raw on November 21st. There's a big brawl between Razor and his team and Diesel and his team. You don't get a lot of action between you and Scott at Survivor Series, as the whole match is really more of a backdrop for Diesel and Sean breaking up. And your participation in the show is obviously more remembered for getting super kicked by Chuck Norris. But boy, you're in there with a lot of Hall of Fame talent. We'll talk about old Chuck and this match in long form some other time. But coming off that show, you worked the next day in Youngstown, Ohio, in front of 1,800 folks on Razor. The travel is just crazy back then. You got Survivor Series in San Antonio, Texas. And from there, Lex, Davey Boy, Razor, Taker, Paul Bear, Doink, and Dink have to fly to New York to be a part of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And from there, Scott's going to head to Youngstown for the show. What a crazy schedule this is, especially if you got a wife and some youngins at home, right?
I believe this is the year that I spent Thanksgiving Day in Pittsburgh with Kevin Nash at the Holiday Inn, and we ate turkey dinner together. It was, and look, we were happy to do it. It's part of the industry, and the 10 on 3 off, 4 on 3 off. I think we were just in the middle of all that kind of groove, but it was grueling. I think they froze their ass off for Macy's, that whole deal. Yeah, that was the WWF in '94 for sure.
As a heads up, I think Thanksgiving that year was on November 24th. So it would have been the day after Survivor Series, which was the 23rd. That night, they had two shows, one in Youngstown, Ohio, that you're on, and then another in Ontario. The day after Thanksgiving, the 25th, as you said, you are indeed working second from the top with Razor Ramon in Pittsburgh. And then what do you know? The next day, Madison Square Garden, 7,300 folks there. And that's where it's a big day because we're going to get to see Diesel, who's substituting for Bret Hart, beat Bob Backlund to become the world champ in just a couple of seconds.
Wow. So wait. Now make sure we did Youngstown on the day before Thanksgiving. Wait, what was the
On
day?
Thanksgiving. So
On
Survivor
Thanksgiving,
Series was the day before Thanksgiving.
Wednesday night.
The next morning, you guys did the parade. That night, you're in Youngstown, Ohio. There's another crew that's going to work Belleville, Ontario.
Yeah.
That day. The 25th, you're in Pittsburgh. The 26th, you're at MSG.
Jeez.
And then it's
How about
time to, and then you're back in Ontario again. So you're just all over the place, but my goodness, what a time. And here's one of your pals, somebody that you had just shared Thanksgiving with, and now he's the top guy. He's got the big belt. Seeing you, one of your friends that you were making towns with and traveling with occasionally and trying to infiltrate his group. Now he's got the big belt. This is the same belt that the Macho Man, one of your heroes, wore. This is the same belt that Ric Flair wore. This is the same belt that Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior wore. And now your pal has it. Did that feel like a major moment to you?
It was huge. And look, and I'm sure the research, and there could be a whole nother story, and you may have already done this with Bruce and others, but the Bob Backlund chicken wing and that vision and that direction went so heavy. Basically that, I don't say that late summer and fall, and then the plug was pulled. I mean, they switched the title on a live event, and it was hammer down. Vince wanted to change courses, and he did, and it was really cool. I mean, Kevin would probably tell you this day, it came quickly, it came suddenly, not an enormous amount of build as far as getting steam behind him, because he had come in and got his feet wet and was Sean's heater, but the Diesel persona was more of a heavy. So they gave him the ball quick, and the boss wanted it, and that's the direction we took it. But yeah, it was very cool. Very cool for Kev.
2 days later, there's a Monday Night Raw taping, and not only do you get a big victory over Davey Boy, but you get a new heater. It's going to be the debut of the Roadie. Jesse James Armstrong makes his debut and helps you get the win. Let's start with the match itself. Davey Boy is a world-class worker. What's it like being in the ring with him, especially on Monday Night Raw?
Davey, so much success, SummerSlam 92. Prior to that, the Bulldogs. At this stage of Davey's career, he worked his ass off. He was massive and big and strong and all that, but he loved to have a good time. So I always enjoyed it. He would laugh and cut up, but it's one of those things. He's easy and I'm easy. How are we going to do this? And it was so simple to put things together. But, and I know there are people who listen to this and in the ad-free family know Davey's body of work, but you talk about a guy that can go, man.
Oh man. Yeah.
Especially in his heyday. But yeah.
Even back in the tag days. I mean,
that to me is the Davey Boy in his prime.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, that's his prime, because SummerSlam 92 was huge, without question. But he had gotten more into that single, more character mode. But as far as in-ring work, tag team Davey was, wow, off the charts good. So good. And they work so well together. But anyhow, yeah, we put it together, and look, the once we do an episode, and with the recent news of Brian Gerard James, and I'm excited, man. I am really excited because we chatted the other day, and we just talked, and I told him, look, on the calendar, Rumble 95's coming up. And look, he debuted in Lowell, Mass. And I remember this. So, Conrad, you probably may correct me, but correct me if I'm wrong. Me and Davey Boy, is this Lowell, Mass?
I don't recall.
Okay. All right. That's fine. It just, I remember they put us together. Brian held his foot that day when he did, or maybe that's where he got his tryout. So I may have it wrong. He did his tryout. But when they said we were hooking up, I was so pumped because the Double J character had a full year of a build. And when they said, hey, the greatest country, because I'd been saying greatest singer, greatest entertainer. And then all of a sudden, now I'm getting a roadie. And look, Brian, his lineage and Armstrong and everything that goes with it.
Mid Hudson Civic Center, November 28th, Poughkeepsie.
Is where this match was.
This is where we first see the roadie, and you were doing a 14-minute match with Davey Boy.
Yeah, he got his job in Lowell, Mass. That's where he had his tryout and sang in front of Vince. And and Bruce was in the room, and they said, all right, we're going to make him Jeff's roadie. So
the Lowell, Mass show was 2 days after. I think you might have that one backwards.
No, I think, anyway, I'm trying to he had his tryout. So when was the time before we were in Lowell? But anyway, that's
March. You were there in March, August, and then this one in November.
Okay, so I'm off. Anyhow, getting too granular memory. But anyway.
You help yourself. You love it. It's every week. We're also trying to sell ads and entertain people, but it's also me playing Jeopardy with Jeff every week.
All right, I'll shut up.
Well,
anywho.
Please do. When you say it, I mean, actually do it this one time.
Okay. All right. The bad guy, Razor Ramon. I hope you folks are enjoying this one. It was really, really fun to record. And Conrad, when we get done recording from time to time, we'll kind of look at each other and go, depending upon him, he made me cry or get emotional. But I really do enjoy episodes like this, taking a walk down memory lane, and very, very special times in my life. And one of the things is, a lot of times I get comments on Twitter, and they're like, I had no idea about this, and this. And folks, that's kind of what Miracle Made is all about. It's like, did you know this? And did you know that? And I'm going to tell you 2 points here that candidly, the first time I heard about Miracle Made, I was just like, what? Anyway, I knew this first one, but I want you guys to know that, did you know the temperature? Your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. That's right, Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made used, oh my gosh, you will not believe this, silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night. Now, folks, this is what is just a kind of a showstopper for me. But did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? Folks, let me just say that one more time. Did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? Yeah, it can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses. It's just plain gross. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning, that's right, self-cleaning, eco-friendly bedding such as sheets, pillowcases, comforters that prevent 99% of bacteria and require, guys, listen up, it requires 3 times less laundry. So that means for you sickos out there, you only have to wash your sheets maybe once a year as opposed to 3 times. I'm kidding. Folks, Miracle Made. Self-cooling properties for better quality sleep, self-cleaning, luxurious comfort and quality designed for your skin. Folks, go try miracle.com/myworld. So it's trymiracle.com/myworld to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for your honey or for your loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. That's what we do here at My World. We get you savings. And if you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. What a deal. Miracle is so confident in their product. It's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Folks, I'm going to tell you that one more time. If you aren't 100% satisfied, it costs you nothing. You'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/myworld and use the code MyWorld to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, try miracle.com/myworld to treat yourself. One more time. That's trymiracle.com/myworld to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode of My World.
Hey, when did you know Jesse was coming into the company, or Brian, as we like to call him here on the show? I mean, are you excited about this? I mean,
that's why I was trying to I'm pissed off. I feel for sure he got his tryout, not actually in ring, but he sang in front of Vince, and they're like, "Oh my God, we've got this Double J character." And Brian has Southern roots, and Double J has Southern roots, and the Roadie, and all this. Boom, we're going with it. It literally just clicked. Everything clicked. So I wasn't aware. Man Mount Rock. I'm trying to think how the tryout came about. I don't know if Stevie or I don't know that's a good story we can ask one day on what was the original connection of how he got his tryout. But I was tickled to death. I was so excited when they're like, "Yeah, we're putting him with you." So, and then this Davey Boy match, and he debuted, and Brian held his foot, and we started coming up with like when creative juices start flowing, and Brian has a boatload of them. But when we started bouncing ideas off at the very beginning, I remember Brian saying, "Hey, I'm going to get these laminates, and hey, I'm going to wear these sweatbands." And he and he's like, "Come here, Jeff." And he talked to stagehands that were in the arena, and he looked at him and he goes, "Hey, see this little pin light that roadies use? I'm going to get one of those." And I'm like, "Oh, wow. No, we got to go tell TV this." And just a little back and forth that we would have, that Brian dove into the character. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that he gave to NXT, the subtleties of like, all right, how do we make this character authentic and work and a little bit over the top, but not too far. But man, when he got his head wrapped around the Roadie, it clicked, man. It really, really clicked.
As far as just personalities, not work, because you told us a lot about work, but just your and his personality. Did you guys click right away?
Immediately. Back in those days, I wasn't a morning guy, Conrad. So I would.
It's not the case now. If you want to text Jeff at 4:30 in the morning, he'd be glad to get you a response in 6 seconds.
Okay.
What? It's true. I mean, I can always count on, no matter how early I get up, if I text you, I'm getting a response.
I love it. So, but I remember the first night we shared a room together, we might have had a few adult beverages. You know, Brian never really liked to drink. Other stuff.
He did other stuff, yeah.
Back in those days. But I remember barely opening my eyes, and I see Brian in our room, and he's not in bed. He's over there sitting in a chair, just sitting there in thought and thinking things. And I'm like, what's he doing? And then all of a sudden he sees me stirring. He goes, "Hey man, I've been up about an hour. I'm going to go back outside. I hope I didn't wake you up." I said, "Wake me up." He said, "Yeah, I've been outside twice. I went and smoked cigarettes." I said, "So you left the room and smoked cigarettes?" I said, "I appreciate that." Anyway, we hit it off from day one, and we've been best of friends since then.
Let me ask, listen, you mentioned it, so I don't feel bad asking a follow-up. Were you nervous about perhaps blowing your big chance? I mean, once upon a time, there was a pretty famous story with Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik making a town, and some lights go on, and what do you know? All of a sudden, they've got some stuff in the car that maybe wasn't supposed to be there. And you're relatively new to the company here. It's sitting in your dad's company, and you're getting the big time push, and there's a precedent set. Were you nervous? Was there a best practice? What can you tell us about Jeff?
And maybe that didn't come out. Brian would get up and go smoke cigarettes, legitimately cigarettes. And
no, not left-handed cigarettes.
No, sir. No, okay. Sir. He loved him some cigarettes. So look,
the other stuff came later, you're saying?
Yes.
I got you.
True. And certainly never carried in cars.
Let me ask you this. In your opinion, and I know we're getting way sideways, I'm just asking. There's really kind of two sets of guys in wrestling. Once upon a time, there were guys who maybe they liked somas and pharmaceuticals, because let's not forget, you guys are essentially getting into, 25 car crashes a night when you're taking bumps on that unbelievably stiff WWE ring. and then you're cramming yourselves into a car and driving for hours on end. So I'm not judging anyone who looked for an opiate or a painkiller or a muscle relaxer or something like that. But I am saying it's been talked about a lot that there were really two types of guys. Guys who liked pills, for instance, a Shawn Michaels, and then guys who liked the old left-handed cigarettes, maybe a guy like Bret Hart. Um, did you understand that a lot of the quote unquote use of those left-handed cigarettes was really a pain coping mechanism?
So the question is, did I understand that it was a pain coping?
Like, did it have a stigma to you because you grew up in the South, but you grew up in a wrestling family and in a wrestling environment? And once upon a time, boy, a lot of folks were pretty nervous about that sort of thing. But there is an alternative, which maybe in hindsight wasn't any good either. The opiate deal wrecked America.
And
Where,
I,
where
yeah.
did you stand on that?
So I always viewed it as three different groups: guys that liked alcohol, guys that like smoking, and guys that like their pills. And I always mentally had it in my brain that, the adrenaline that flows, I don't care if there's 150 people, 2,000, 10,000. It's all relatively the same. I also think I knew this even way back then. It's somewhat of a survival. When you get out and you're pounding your body, it's the adrenaline gets to pump it. And when you finish and go shower and got to jump in the car, you don't got to. You choose to jump in the car, and whether you're just driving 3 hours back home or going to the hotel and go in the hotel bar, then go to bed, rinse and repeat the next day, it's all sort of coming down off that adrenaline rush. And people did it differently, but I always put it in three different categories. And at the very core of it, as it manifests itself through the years, in the disease of addiction, if you are if you have the gene of it, it eventually turns on you, and it just flips the switch. But I always put it in three buckets, but it's all about coming down off that adrenaline dump.
So let's talk. Oh, totally. I want to ask about Road Dogg again here. Did you guys immediately know that because of his singing ability that the breakup was the ultimate destination, and how that storyline would play out? Or was that
Not
not apparent to you right away?
Not at all. Matter of fact, we started kicking around ideas on where we could go with it. Look, he is a great singer. I am not. Can I sing? Yeah, but everybody can sing. It's just whether you're good or not. But I think how can we go with this? Because I mean, we even had discussions early. Look, we were just talent, and Vince, Pat, and Bruce were the creative. Where's this going to go? But eventually there's going to be a babyface turn out of it. But to get mileage out of it, Brian came in, and he's one of four Armstrong boys who could all wrestle. So we always thought from the very beginning, the natural progression was going to be, maybe we tag for a while. Maybe there's a tag team of Double J and the Roadie with the tag team, which would not be a bookend tag team, the traditional kind of tag. So we really thought, okay, they're going to go with a tag. How's this story going to develop? We knew, the very first night, the very first set of TVs, Vince was very happy, loved it. I knew that Brian's bump taking charisma was like money. I knew we would work great together. Brian could talk. From his Marine days, and he was a lot of people don't know what an accomplished Marine. Yes, he went to war, and I'm going to respect that because I don't know the ins and outs of it. But Brian, stateside, he was a leader in a big, big way in the Marine Corps, in his platoon, and he stood at attention and holding the American flag behind Bush's inauguration, and just dude is super talented. But so I can't say enough about that, but his charisma, we just both knew, man, these got so much legs in this. So we had no idea that we were headed toward the Milli Vanilli storyline, and certainly not that quick at this point.
Your first interview segment with Roadie takes place on December 17th. It's a Superstars taping on the Heartbreak Hotel with Shawn Michaels. Did you know at that point, hey man, a month from now or so, I'm going to be IC champ? Or when do you find out?
There was talk that, all along that, okay, but just because how Kevin was, Diesel was world champ, and where where they're headed with that, and all the different opponents. And I mean, Taker and IRS and the head shrinker, we would have to go through the card, but it was a very natural fit. Double J and Razor are headed toward a storyline. So we knew that much. Did I know they were switching the title? No. Look, I don't want to say I didn't know to the night of. Early January would probably be a safe bet, or maybe into December. But Scott, God bless him too, he always, whether it was the agents or Vince or whatever, Scott was like, yeah, Double J could go. I mean, it was the buddy system, as some folks, but Scott wouldn't do that if he didn't mind telling folks, hey man, you're terrible, right to your face, if you weren't up to par. And Scott didn't mean any disrespect about it, but getting on the level and the show, you better be able to go, or you're not going to help your opponent out, yourself out, or the company out.
So the next week on Superstars, Christmas Eve, it's announced that you'll be taking on Razor for the Intercontinental title. I mentioned the date because it's just 1 year ago where you make your debut for the company. And now here you are, announced as challenging for the second biggest belt on maybe the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. Quite a little journey from point A to point B here, is it not?
That's what I'm saying. In one of the early episodes, when we talked about the debut of Double J and the vignettes and all that, it goes during this generation, during this era, the new generation of Vince and company's mentality of building a character, and they stayed the course and obviously made tweaks along the way. And from the doinks and whatever opponents I had, it was just a very slow, methodical build, and they defined that character. You mentioned that interview segment, that on the Heartbreak. I mean, just there were things that they continued to craft to build these characters. And that was the business model, and they perfected it in so many ways.
I also want to mention that while you go to your European tour, Germany, Israel, England, you're going to be working with Razor every single night, putting him over. So you guys are really getting to work out the kinks and get your timing down. And do you know the finish at this point? Like, are they saying, hey, I'm just wondering, in terms of your head, you know that you're doing a lot of shows for the live crowd, but knowing that you're going to have this one big sort of coming out party, a major pay-per-view match, I'm sure you're tinkering with different spots and things like that. But when do you guys have any sort of finish in mind, or do you even know that you're going to be leaving as champ?
We don't know at this point. That tour that we started in the UK and did some German dates, and the flight from Germany to Tel Aviv, we got off the plane, went through heavy security, get on a bus, drive up to Jerusalem, and we worked Jerusalem, and then we worked Tel Aviv. And I mean, I can remember Jerusalem, it was a very small show, so that probably got the C match, in Tel Aviv, maybe the B match. But that German flight, I could remember we were all dead tired, and I mean, we filled up the whole plane, but it was still commercial. It wasn't a charter, and man, just those trips. But to your question, we were fine tuning, and we came up with a couple of different heat spots, but we didn't know the finish, but we knew that we could take some of match A and some of match B and some of match C. And by the time we got to Tampa, we would have 90% of the match and then deliver what they wanted. All right, let's take another break here. And you know why I usually love breaks when we're recording podcasts? Because that gives me an opportunity to eat a snack. Yes, folks, usually during the My World recordings, Conrad reads the ads, and he does it in such an eloquent way. But what does old Double J do? I hop out of my seat and I get a snack. And 9 times out of 10, It is a Factor meal. And I can assure you, because the old Last Outlaw has to stay in shape. And folks, you out there, my biggest enemy as far as my food needs are the snacks, the chips. I'm not a candy guy, but man, I can dive into some just plain junk food. But when having Factor meals in the house, it is truly a game changer, a lifesaver, and it keeps me. I burn a lot of calories, but it keeps my blood sugar good. I feel good all day because I have the ability to eat good, healthy meals. And I'm telling you, with the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days, just like today is for me. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. And folks, yeah, that may be just some ad copy, but I just want you guys to understand something. This is Jeff Jarrett talking directly to you. It's the reason that I am so head over heels, and Karen is too, about Factor, because you save time, I eat good, and then I stay on track. The copy says stay on track with my healthy lifestyle. No, I stay on track, because if I don't eat good, my day can fall apart. So, if you're too busy this fall to cook, but want to make sure you're eating well, with Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the shopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back to crushing your goals. Too busy running around during the day to think about lunch? Keep your energy up with Lunch to Go, effortless, wholesome meals like grain bowls and salad toppers that are ready to eat when you're on the go. No microwave needed. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in our meals. This September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. Folks, head to factormeals.com/myworld50. Folks, that is factormeals.com/myworld50, and use code myworld50 to get, you guessed it, 50% off. That's code myworld50 at factormeals.com/myworld50 to get 50% off. Folks, hope you're enjoying. Let's get back to the pod.
We're still going with the country singer gimmick. Superstars, January 2nd, 1995. You're supposed to perform on the King's Court with Jerry Lawler, but unfortunately, damn it, there are some technical difficulties and you're unable to sing. And this is now a new wrinkle in the character. And I wonder, was it introduced because they knew of the Roadie's singing skills at this point? Or was that still not, as far as you know, the plan here?
They knew Brian could sing from day one. I think it's a big part of why he originally got hired, among other things, but they knew the pairing, he can sing. But again, the slow, methodical build. And this was just on social media the other day, and just the great links of Brian's there. And then I played a little Keystone Cop, and the neck of my guitar almost turned over the mic stand, and Brian got it, and then the lighting and the reverb, and just the great links they go to, and Shawn Michaels is on commentary and building up that finally Double J is going to sing. Let's go to a break and come back. He's going to sing. All that kind of stuff. Again, great character building. They invested so much in characters during that time. I think a lot of times in today's world, and I get it, it's a quick, but there is something to investing time into character development.
January 16th, and we've discussed this one before. You're going to take on Bret Hart and lose with William Shatner at ringside. Shatner's going to beat up the Roadie afterwards. And Jeff, I know this is Bret's return and his match after losing at the Survivor Series to Bob Backlund. But in 2 weeks, you're winning the Intercontinental Championship. Did you assume it would be a different finish, or, obviously it's not an issue for you to put over Bret Hart. I mean, he's the top baby face, but do you remember this night? What can you share with us? You're thinking about the creative.
I can remember, and as we sort of discussed this, if I didn't know, they certainly knew I was winning the title at Rumble, because it just makes sense that it's kind of an honor. It is an honor. Brett's coming back after a couple of month hiatus. I know he had been running hard for several years, but I don't know if it was a month or however long a hiatus, but they chose me to go in there to say Brett's going to have a hell of a match, but he's going to beat somebody clean, that it won't hurt him. And we know where we're going with him, but it's a good win. And Willie Shatner, William Shatner and Road Dogg and the pairing, and it's entertaining, and it was an honor. A main event on Raw, a big deal, certainly for a young Double J. A main event on Raw to get to work with Brett on his return, and William Shatner, and I'm sure it was a USA Network special or something that he was there plugging, but it was Vince doesn't beat people in slots unless he believes they can carry the ball. So, especially during that era.
There's a fun segment on Superstars on January 21st. It's the final build of the show. Razor wins a squash match, and then you and Roadie come out, and as Razor grabs the mic, Roadie cuts the power to the mic. Nice little touch there, Jeff. Is that a Bruce idea, a Pat idea, or is that a Brian idea?
It was obviously done back in Stanford in creative rooms. It feels like a Bruce, like a Pat, maybe a Vince, but just them playing it out in a creative room. And what if we did this? And what if we did that? And it may have come up with, okay, what does Razor actually need to say? Because they've been building this week after week after week. And somebody says, he really doesn't need to say anything. Okay, how do we get there? Well, here's the idea. What's a Roadie do? He's dialed in to audio. Boom. So, just the fun, collaborative, creative process.
The last house show you worked before the Royal Rumble is once again Madison Square Garden. And man, you're all over the show. You're a part of Sean's Heartbreak Hotel. Then you're in the main event with Sean at ringside for you to sub in for Bob Backlund to take on Diesel. Main eventing the Garden with Sean at ringside, and you're standing across from Diesel. I mean, clearly you're a part of the clique here. I believe you now. Diesel gets the win, obviously. It's in front of 5,400 people. How big of an accomplishment is this in your wrestling career? You're main eventing for the WWF title at Madison Square Garden.
I think about how young I was too.
Yeah.
It's as big as it gets in the WWF, and they're the biggest promotion in the world with the most prestige, and I'm a heel. So pretty big honors, actually very big honors. And the timing of the industry too, that there's always ebbs and flows, and you look at flow charts on, live event business and ratings. And, at this time we were 1 hour on USA Network. Just when you just sort of put it all together, we're talking, obviously mid 90s in the Japan industry, and the UK scene was nothing like it was today, and Mexico. So this is at the early stages of AAA, CMLL, the dominant promotion. You just sort of take the industry in as a whole. And so for young Double J to get a main event, I got to walk past the Garden yesterday, eating at my diner, Conrad. It's not Waffle House, but I love me some New York diners. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I don't even know how to put it. It's absolutely huge. And it's something that, no matter how much you want to chastise me, Conrad, about a horseman or not a horseman, I'm main evented Madison Square Garden. So suck it.
Hey, ain't nothing wrong with that, Bubba. Let's talk about the Royal Rumble 1995. We're here at the Tampa Sun Dome. It's January 22nd. You're opening the show with you and Razor, and it's for the Intercontinental title. Meltzer would say the crowd reactions really hurt JArrett in particular, and even Hart and Diesel for much of their match. They were doing some very good work, and it just didn't seem like the crowd cared. Do you remember the crowd being rough? I mean, when you think about that night, do you remember it being a challenge to get them going?
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but as time has gone on in the My World of research and being able to go back, and I was never a weekly reader of Dave, but just sort of hearing things. And look, this is he's in California. So this is word of mouth. This is no streaming, no FaceTime. Dave really had to take word of mouth and then watch it through an audio feed when he's watching at home. So is an authentic reading. I'm sure he did the best he could, but also wants to make the best report he can for his readers, and some fiction and some not fiction. I don't recall that at all. Matter of fact, on pay-per-view Sundays, I mean, we documented it, Youngstown, 2,000 people or whatever those numbers were, and those, Canadian blue check runs that had 2 or 3,000 people. The Sundome, we had Lawrence Taylor and the Rumble, a huge match. Those were big events. Like you said, the number 2 event of the year. I remember the people, I mean, they were with everything. And me and Scott had our match down, and the opening sequences, I'm bumping all over the place, and the people are with it. I get it. And I get the researchers. I guess I'm tired and a little cool and calm, but and I get that the researchers don't want to go look at Wade Keller or Jason Powell or other research material, but they stick with old Dave. I just don't remember. Look, Dave's going to write what he wrote, but I'll disagree with Mr. Meltzer, but he can write what he wants and sell his sheets all he wants. They were with it. I vividly remember when they reacted to the DQ flat finish, which Pat Patterson called everything to a T when he went over the finish. And we're going to do this and the count out, and they're going to boo and let Razor get so far here and say your first line, and so far here. And Scott, how you're going to respond and how we're going to do this. And then you build them back up, and you make the flurry and work on the knee and work on the knee. And then you get him right where you want. And Scott, get him up. And I can't do a good French accent, but he's going through these whole motions, and Scott, you stick him and pull him up for the razor's edge, and your leg goes out. I mean, Pat had all this emotion, and we went out, and the people were with every moment of it, and they booed the shit out of it. But I beat Scott with a small package. It's just good storytelling.
I'm just curious from a inside baseball show perspective. Would you rather our research only pull quotes that were complimentary, that said nice things, or do you like having something to argue against?
I like more than Meltzer.
Okay. So you want me to read 3 or 4 match recaps next time we do one of these?
Not you. You don't read them. No. Look, it's we've sort of gone around and around with the research, but I feel that they've fallen right back into only pulling from Dave. And I think as a listener, they go, all they do is pull up a Meltzer recap. I know back then there were 2 or 3 other researchers, and on the Dallas episodes, they got court cases, and I know you can't do that on every one, but you got Matt Watch, and you got all kinds of different. Meltzer isn't the only writer. I guess
He's the only one that matters. He's the only one of relevance. He's the only one people are talking about now. I mean, you didn't, at the start of the show, you didn't ask me what Wade Keller thought of Game Changer. You said, what did Dave say?
Oh, Conrad's.
No, I'm just saying, like, nobody gives a damn what anybody thinks about wrestling from a historical perspective without the Observer. The Observer is the industry trade. So I just feel like I'm serving you up Coca-Cola, and you're like, man, I wanted some Mountain Dew today. Which, don't get me wrong, solid drink. A lot of people drink it. But Dave Meltzer, Lord, he's the Coca-Cola. He just is.
Oh, no, I'm not disagreeing. He's Coca-Cola, but there's a variety here. That's where I'm going with it.
But what we're talking about is a match recap and opinion of a single match.
I know, but I think we can create the narrative that it's Eric versus Meltzer, Bruce versus Meltzer, Jeff versus Meltzer, Arn versus Meltzer. And I think that does a disservice to the listeners. That's literally all I'm saying.
But we don't just use Meltzer. I mean, half the stuff in here was not in the Observer that we've covered today. I'm talking about this match recap. It is. Let's read it here. JArrett won the IC title from Ramon in a total time of 18 minutes and 6 seconds. Ramon opened strong with a blockbuster suplex and chokeslam. JArrett took a lot of big bumps. As the story of the match, JArrett did a good job of carrying Ramon, but the crowd doesn't care about JArrett. And even when it got exciting, they never really got the heat they should have. They traded near falls and did a few clumsy Mexican high spots. Ramon crotched JArrett on the post and did a clothesline off the top for a near fall. The first part of this match finished when Ramon took a bump over the top rope and started selling his left knee. Outside the ring, Roadie clipped Ramon's knee and he was counted out of the ring at 11:47. JArrett then said he didn't want to win by count out because he knew he wouldn't get the title. The same basic deal they'd been doing at the house shows and Ramon's matches since November. He called Ramon a chicken, so of course Ramon got back in, still selling the knee. JArrett mainly worked over the leg flare style, pulling out the figure 4 at 3:15 before Ramon broke it after 70 seconds. He kept selling the knee during his comeback and did a hot spot where Ramon went for a backward suplex. JArrett reversed it in midair and Ramon reversed it again for a near fall. However, the crowd, for whatever reason, just wasn't into it. Finally, Ramon went to the razor's edge, but his knee gave out and he dropped JArrett, who scored with an inside cradle in 6 minutes and 19 seconds, 3.25 stars. I love the story you're trying to tell. He hurt his knee. You're calling him out. You keep working on it. And then even when it looks like he's got you beat with that finish, the old wily veteran snatches that inside cradle. And that's all she wrote. Great old school traditional match stuff. I think this is a really good match. I watched it maybe a year ago and I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it because as we've established here on the show, back then you and I were not friends and I was just hitting that fast forward. My batteries died in my remote, had to sit through the whole damn thing. And I was surprised it was actually really damn good.
3.25 stars that the people weren't with. That's what I guess the stars come from the execution of botching Mexican high spots. Would you ever confuse Razor Ramon with doing Mexican high spots?
No, I do think it's funny though how that has maybe changed in time. You know, I don't think he would use that phrase to recap an AEW show these days.
What phrase?
Mexican high spots.
Oh, correct. Okay, yeah, and I'm having fun here, but yeah, the story. I go back to Pat Patterson, just a really good storyteller. He knew both of our characters inside and out. You know, with the Roadie coming on the scene, I think it would have been kind of simple if you would have involved Roadie in the finish, but Roadie got his heat because he's the original one who really clipped Scott's leg outside to tell a story, and then we just kept on it and kept on it. But again, the characters, the execution, the timing, I love going on first. I think it sets the tone with a really good match, but I don't think anybody in the building thought I was winning. I think it came out of nowhere, and I think that's a good vibe starting a show. Traditionally, you always want to put a babyface over to kick it off, but if you're really going to have a shocking finish that the people go, well, that wasn't supposed to happen, or we didn't expect that, it can be a shot in the arm to set the tone like, all right, we don't know who's going to win any match tonight. Let's go.
I want to mention the show was sold out. Probably not a surprise to anybody, but still, it's nice whenever you can get a sellout on pay-per-view. What do you remember, as you come through the curtain there? Are you happy with the way the match went? Or were you disappointed? What would you say?
Knowing that we had worked so many times, me and Scott had it down. And so only a few things that go through my mind, like what camera shot did they get? Because there were a couple of, you just want to make sure that it all clicked. But, obviously you go to the agent and they're super excited and whatever talent you saw, but most importantly, the ref and Scott and, hey man, what'd you think? How'd it go? This, that. I mean, we were working so many shows. We knew, the next night we're going on to Raw. I think that's where my shoulders burned from the light up jacket. But no, it was, again, I'm going to go. I was still so, I was young, but man, here I am. Tampa Sundome, sellout crowd, and I'm walking out here the IC champ. It's pretty cool, Conrad, for sure.
I want to mention, as we said, when it comes to Dave Meltzer and the Wrestling Observer, he gave it 3.25 stars. What did Wade give it? 2.5 stars. He didn't like it worth a damn. He said A very well plotted match, strong because of the drama and near falls, but weak in crowd heat, bumps, and overall athleticism, especially early. He gave it 2.5 stars, which is just a star and a half better than Undertaker and IRS. So Wade didn't like it nearly as much as Dave, but I mean, it seems like you guys dug it. Was Vince happy with it?
Yes. Vince, I can't ever remember a time. I think the vignettes, and hats off to Bruce and Kerwin. And, we started off so strong, and Vince, I'll let Bruce or others say, or maybe Vince I believe my perception was he loved the character. But when me and Roadie hooked up, it went to another level, and you knew that, okay, we're going hammer down, and it was clicking, and the heat and the crowd reactions and our look. Brian is a hell of a bump taker by himself, and I think I can take a few bumps for a heel. You put us together, man. You talk about some entertaining matches that get baby faces over. That was our job, and I thought we did it really well.
You're not done for the night. You make a run in during the Diesel Bret Hart match for the WWF title. Any reason you were included other than you were working with Diesel the next night? Or what's your thinking on that as to why you would be involved and in the mix there?
You need a heel that can bump and hit his cues and times and distraction and play his role. And, I can get my ass beat up 3 or 4 times. It doesn't hurt me at all. I'll come right back out with my mouth and get heat. So I'll say, I think at times during my career, specifically in WCW, being a utility guy that could work and talk and bump, I think sometimes it was a safety valve that, oh yeah, Jeff can do it. Send him out. One of those deals.
Well, and again, it's a big time pay-per-view and you're interfering in the world title match. We just covered that you main evented Madison Square Garden, now in front of a sold out Royal Rumble crowd, the second or third biggest pay-per-view of the year. You're winning the second biggest belt, and now you're actively involved in the big belt match. I mean, this is a big doggone deal. I mean, is this the biggest night in your career at this point to win the Intercontinental Championship on pay-per-view?
There's not even a close second. I mean, not even a close second. It was, the Garden Run. I mean, the Garden Show. All those are big, but winning a title, like you said, at Rumble, and heels rarely win on Rumble. I don't say rarely win, but they certainly. I mean, you could probably do a win-loss record. Heels don't usually win on Mania, Rumble. They kind of win SummerSlam. It's a big deal. It was a big deal. For sure, Conrad. I mean, the Cotton Bowl win over Eric Embry that we covered a couple of shows ago. Yeah. I mean, it was big, but
it's so much bigger.
It's a global platform. Yes, huge.
Is this something you've sort of played it cool on every time I've brought up a question like this? But is this something you're calling home and talking to somebody about, or you can share with your friends or family back at home, or because you've grown up in it? As cool as it is it still just another day at the office and that's not really what you do?
Conrad, I got 3 or 4 texts, not last night, but around 10 o'clock today, when guys got to their work and started scrolling through my social media, and they're like, "Hey, asshole, why didn't you tell us you were wrestling last night? We would have watched," that kind of stuff. I've just never been one, and I think it's how I was raised. If it is work, it's a business, and I'm glad that I look at it that way. That I don't say, "Hey, no, not calling home," and "Hey, I'm the champ now." It just was never in my genetic makeup, DNA, family. Look, when you're 14 years old and Andy Kaufman is a part of dinner table discussions, winning the IC title, just, I don't know, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. You know where I'm going with Conrad.
Sure. No,
It wasn't a phone call home.
Your internet connection's probably got a little tired today, so we're going to start wrapping things up here. We're excited about next week. Before we get there,
just a second ago. That's weird. Okay.
I've got full bars on my side, but you got that hillbilly Hendersonville internet. I got that Comcast business.
You know what? I wonder if it is. Cody's out of school.
So Cody's upstairs streaming Spider-Man.
I'm just wondering if, because I got kids in the house.
Normally, you and I record in the morning, and it's just you and I on our internet connections. But right now, Codeman is talking trash to somebody on Xbox.
He's training. You know where he just came back from, Conrad? Gold's Gym.
I heard about that in Nashville. He's going to grow up to be big and strong, and we're proud of him.
And I tell you what, I know, Conrad, you and Cassio probably, I don't want to say you came to your feet last night when I beat Effie, but there was probably some celebration going on. Not near as big a celebration as Code Man. Karen videoed him. I got to share it with you.
I can't wait to see. The Rumble has a lot of celebrity involvement. Pam Anderson is here. She's the biggest star in the world. Of course, Baywatch has taken over pop culture in a way we can't adequately describe here or properly contextualize. Lawrence Taylor is here because he's getting ready for the big Royal Rumble or the big WrestleMania showdown with Bam Bam Bigelow, but we've got to lay the groundwork here. And obviously that's going to be a big part of what we're trying for WrestleMania 11. Ultimately, WrestleMania 11 winds up being a flop. In hindsight, did Vince rely too much on the celebrity involvement and not enough on the bread and butter wrestling that maybe had gotten everybody to buy the pay-per-view to begin with?
Are you talking about at Rumble or at Mania?
Either or. It feels like, hey, great, we got an Intercontinental Title change, but my goodness, Pamela Anderson's here. It's almost secondary, and it feels like they should be here to add to, not take away, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I just, maybe these were, well, no, this certainly wasn't the first shows because all the manias and all that, but I thought it was so, I always studied all this on like where the inserts went in the Raw when watching the finished product, and back in those days, VHS tapes, and watch it when I got home, on like how you integrated a Pam Anderson or how you integrated a LT. And LT is a different story because we knew we were going to Mania with that. But, Pam Anderson was not, it was an attraction, and she's going to walk Shawn to the ring. But you barely touched on it. Pam Anderson in 95 was probably the number one National Enquirer. TMZ wasn't around, but help me out, Conrad. But as far as that Hollywood buzz,
unbelievably huge.
Baywatch huge, but just everything that surrounded a Hollywood celebrity, Pam Anderson was that, and she's on our show. So I was always tried to sit under the learning tree again and see how it's integrated in, knowing she's not in a wrestling role, because the territory days, if you're going to put somebody on the card and give them a payday, what's the ROI? Like, how are we going to get money out of this? And Pam Anderson wasn't taking bumps, and she wasn't a special referee, and truly just window dressing. But okay, I got educated through the years that, okay, she's going to be in an advertisement where the folks go, oh, wow, Pam Anderson is at this pay-per-view. I'm going to check this out. One of those things. So you don't always bet 1,000 with celebrity engagement. Not at all. But it also is, I believe, and I come from the school of the cumulative effect. The cumulative effect of having surprises and celebrity involvement work. It just does.
And it's interesting too, 95, as we start the year, obviously she's a megastar on Baywatch, and a modern day, or for that era, Kim Kardashian, just superstar. But obviously she's an actress too. But here's the other thing: later in the year, at the end of the year, is when the rumors start to come out that, hey, there might be a sex tape out there.
Oh, and wow!
They've just turned that into a series over on Hulu that I think is debuting later this month or maybe next month. But it's going to be a mini series about that whole scandal. I think the tape first was widely released in early '96, and man, you want to talk about taking over America. This is way before TMZ, but bootleggers were everywhere, buddy. You think there was some bootlegging going on in the wrestling trading tape era? This is another level. Let's do something we've never done here on the show. We have read a lot of fan questions from social media. We'll continue to do that, but we've been trying to do this for a few weeks, but I think we're finally ready to do it. Whenever you sign up to be a part of adfreeshows.com, you can actually call into the show like a regular old radio show. So we've now got some questions that we can go to from some of our listeners. So Jeff, with that in mind, I'm going to play our first call here. Are you ready?
I'm ready, pal.
Here we go. Let's take a listen here.
Well, this is Andrew Paw, Enhancement Talent. When did Jeff find out that he was going to be part of the run-in during the Diesel Brett match? And did he feel at that point that there were just too many guys involved?
Interesting question. When did you know you were doing a run-in? Day of?
Day of, brother. Day of. I could remember 94 Rumble when we were part of the Undertaker deal in that casket match. I'm getting granular and jumping around, but those run-ins that kind of just happen and one thing leads to another. But I didn't find out till that day. And knowing that you have your sights set and the IC title match and I win, and then you cool off and you go, oh man, I got to go back out there. I better stretch. That's when you can get injured. Anyway, I won't get long-winded, Conrad. You'll get aggravated at me. Good question, though. It is a good question.
Here's one. Let's see if you can decipher what he's saying, because it's got a little inside baseball reference for us. I think you're going to dig it.
Hey, yo, this is Ross. I'm an enhancement talent for adfreeshows.com. Jeff, I have a question for you. On a scale from 1 to Roll Tide, how Roll Tide was Pamela Anderson back then?
How about that? How Roll Tide was Pamela Anderson here in early 95?
Like a combination of Tua, Mac Jones, Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, and Bryce Young, all rolled into one. Roll Tide.
And here's a question about celebrities here. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Jeff, Connie, Hornets Beer Guy here of Half Free Shows, of course, under the slap nut level. Just wondering regarding the 1995 Royal Rumble. I noticed, you had a refrigerator, Lawrence Taylor there. They did this spot with Ben Van Bigelow in the Football Hall of Fame. I was kind of wondering, had it ever crossed your mind, or maybe JArrett's mind when booking the territory down there to bring in, professional athletes or celebrities to kind of book kind of these dream matches, sort of like we saw in the Royal Rumble 95, and of course WrestleMania, it's always had that celebrity presence. So I was just wondering, had it ever crossed your mind to bring in celebrities to I guess generate a better house? Thanks.
So everything's relative, and celebrity is certainly relative. But the single biggest, most guaranteed success on a spot show, and a spot show is Memphis is a regular town. Louisville, Evansville, Nashville, the regular. But if you go to an Armory or a high school gym, is to get the local football coach or basketball or the DJ or the principal of the high school, get that celebrity and get them involved as a special referee. We've done it 1,000 times that this football coach is going to wrestle Jimmy Hart with the blindfold on, and Jimmy Hart has to put the blindfold on, and he does promotion after promotion and radio call in and radio call in. I'm going to beat up the coach. Matter of fact, I'm so confident I'm going to put a blindfold on. And of course, Jimmy Hart gets blindfold. Lawler comes out, one punch. Lawler runs to the back, cover, 1, 2, 3, the big reveal, and the football coach is standing there and does nothing. So we use celebrities, relatively speaking, all the time. DJs, coaches, from time to time, go back to, we used Leon Spinks in Dallas. Celebrities have always been involved. It just not Pam Anderson or Lawrence Taylor level. All right, folks, it's time to hit pause, take a break. Right in the middle of a WrestleMania match, or tag match, as Conrad would say. Now it's time for a hot tag. Well, no, we're not going to do a Conrad Thompson read. We're just not. But I will do the read that these folks have been absolutely fantastic to my world and the ad-free family. And that's right, because this episode is sponsored by none other than Blue Chew. Folks, boys especially, talk about sex, guys. Remember the days when you were always ready to go? Now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence bed. Listen up. BlueChew.com. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night. Boy, is there any daytime takers out there? Or so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Did I say an opportunity arises? Process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com. Consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Best part? It's all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations. What would be awkward about this conversation? And no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct. That's right, direct to your door in a discreet package. What's discreet about getting Blue Chew delivered? Folks, with Blue Chew, men everywhere excited to see the postman, because when your packages arrive, that's right, as Conrad says, that means your package has arrived. They always say first impressions are important. Well, as Conrad so eloquently says, it's always about lasting impressions. They say there's nothing sexier than confidence, and Conrad is a sexy man, and Blue Chew can help give you the confidence, just like Connie has, where it counts. And Conrad knows exactly where it counts. So, folks, Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. It's that simple. They just want you to have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Boy, our special My World listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code MyWorld. At checkout, just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code MyWorld. Again, that's BlueChew.com, promo code MyWorld to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast and Connie's Weenie. You know, he always jokes with me, but again, I'll give it one more time. BlueChew.com, promo code MyWorld.
But this past week, you and I got some news while we were on vacay that we were not expecting. And we decided to make a pivot. So today's show was supposed to be about Lance Russell. And if you're tuning in today and you're disappointed, we're gonna deliver that show to you next week. We're gonna try our very best to do Lance Russell tribute and honor him as much as we can, because what a contributor to wrestling in Memphis, but just wrestling in large. But today we're going to pivot and talk about WrestleMania 11, specifically because of the news we got last week. News that we didn't expect, that we had lost Scott Hall. And I kind of didn't know how to feel about that, because on the one hand, I think everyone listening to this knows that Scott is now finally, and I mean finally, at peace. And that's a good thing. But I can't help but selfishly think, damn, I wish we had more time with him. So I'm glad that he's finally at peace. But man, I didn't expect it this soon. I didn't expect it this early. And I don't know. It feels weird to transition from funny haha to a serious topic, but this is a guy you knew in real life. What'd you think when you saw the news that our friend had 3 heart attacks and was in a bad way?
I want to make sure I answer. So what did I feel when I heard about the heart attacks? Not so much. Well, heck, obviously we've become close. You know, I text you because it was just like, wow. When my father, we had that conversation, he called when Scott fell and went in the hospital to have hip surgery. And my dad said, yeah, we've had a good conversation. Man, I'd like to get him to come stay with me a couple of weeks. You know, he lives by himself. And I just like, you know, I wasn't optimistic that was going to happen, but you know, him and my dad had a relationship. And And I didn't realize how close they continue to be through the years. But anyhow, it's still, Scott, it's no secret. He's had his struggles and ups and downs, like all of us. Scott's are probably a little more public, or a lot more public than a lot of folks. But, death, and it's God Almighty, because all last week and, sitting on the beach or just thinking things through and processing it all. And we talked about death on last week's episode. There's never, ever a time. Well, I haven't expected. You just go, what if, and then, my last conversation with Scott, like what is the last time? And I've racked my brain. When is the last time I saw Scott? When is the last conversation? But man, it in a lot of ways, I just sort of sat through, and then I sort of pivoted and started thinking of all the good times and this and that and what he meant to me over the years. But it's still, as we sit here recording this, you just think, oh, Scott and Kev, they're still running that NWO. They're doing this, they're doing that. And our text exchange, and we had little funny sayings go back and forth, and just the camaraderie. And, people ask me, I don't know, man, I know I'm rambling here, but
no, it's fine.
It's just so, on the one hand, if you back out of that selfishness, you hit the nail on the head. Scott, and we can try to analyze, and Lord knows we all do that in our own funky way, but he is at peace. He is no longer dealing with, you can call them demons or processing his past, or all the ups and downs and what went through his head, but those days are over. So, rest easy, buddy. Rest easy. It sucks. It's still, that's the most simple term. It sucks that he's gone.
Did you read the Wrestling Observer obituary for Scott?
I did not. I'm
going to send it to you. I think you'll love it. There's so much great stuff in there. There's one thing in particular that just stood out. Like,
oh, wow.
A lot of times guys talk about wrestling IQ, and they'll say things like, oh, he had such a great mind for the business and this and that. But something I read in there just jumped off the page. I guess Waltman had talked to Mr. Meltzer, and he said, there was a lot of smart guys in that car, but he was probably the smartest of us all. And he gave an example that one of the things he would do as a television wrestler back in the days of the quote unquote squash match is not just go out there and run through the guy one move after another, but grab a hold. And that gave the commentators an opportunity to put you over and not just feel obligated to call the action. Because if you're just doing one move after another, they're trying to describe the action and talk about what's going on. But if you grab a headlock on a guy, well, now they can talk about you. I just thought, man, what wisdom to not want to say, man, let's go give them the best match possible. What wisdom to say, this is where you give those guys their chance to do their job and do right by you. I had never seen that explained anywhere else before, and it just made all the sense in the world. Those things we had heard for years and years, that Scott Hall had one hell of a mind for the business.
Boy, you ain't kidding. They stoicism and philosophy, and they talk about the writings and how wisdom is passed down, and you can read a book and gain a lifetime of wisdom in a sitting of reading or a couple hours of reading. And, Scott, in car rides or at bars or restaurants or airplanes or bus rides, wherever. And you think about his mentors, and he thought a lot of Kurt Hennig, and Kurt obviously grew up in the business. So Larry the Axe and Vern and the generations of whoever it may be, but it's generation passed down to generation passed down. But those little nuances is what you're talking about. Scott, they talk about getting to the the WWE and working that style, I think Scott and Sean taught me more about the nuances of working that style. And I say more than a television product, but the little example you gave right there, it's really how to get over. It's, and God, this sounds, especially this day and age, oh, it's not a move set and the flippy floppy. I'm not talking about all that, but it's the things that you just pointed out. There's little things,
nuances
that candidly, not just work today. I actually think they work better today, because in the 90s, pretty much all talent was schooled. And when they came through the curtain, if it wasn't an agent, it was one of the boys or your opponent or whatever it is. There was some teaching on the spot. Nowadays, not so much, because it's running and gun and it's blue. It's all that kind of stuff. So I think the little nuances that Scott learned from Kurt and Scott taught me and passed down, I think it works better today. Man, I do want to read that, if you don't mind, Conrad, because Scott's body of work, when you really drill down to it, he came, I don't say the right way or the wrong way, but man, he came up, learned the business, given the ball, and man, did he succeed
in a major way. I mean,
oh gosh,
most everybody listening to this considers Shawn Michaels either 1A or 1B, greatest of all time. But Waltman, I mean, he was the measuring stick for a long time. Waltman would be the guy that they would stick out there with a newcomer. And then when he comes back through the curtain, look at Waltman like, what do you think? And he would either give it a thumbs up or just sort of shrug like he ain't got it or he ain't ready yet, that sort of thing. Waltman was the measuring stick, but he said Shawn was better after working with Scott. I was better after working with Scott.
Oh, for sure.
JArrett was better after working with Scott. And when you think about basketball, because I know you're a big basketball fan, there are players who you'll hear guys say in hindsight now, oh, he made everybody around him better. Scott Hall's that guy in pro wrestling.
For sure. For sure. You know, they talk about Larry Legend, Larry Bird. He, you know, one year they had 60 something wins and the next year he got hurt and was out. And this panelist said, who do you think the MVP should be of this season? And the commentator said, Larry Bird. And they said, Larry Bird has missed 60 or 70 games. And he goes, that's my point. With Larry, everybody's better and they're dominant. Without Larry, remove one member of 12 and they're below 500. And so that analogy that Scott raised everybody's game in so many kind of unique ways, because that's the thing that, you know, I'll say this, through the years, sometimes Scott was rough around the edges in delivery to some guys. And maybe he was, I don't say taking the wrong way. Maybe he delivered it the wrong way, but whatever. But Scott cared about every match on the card. And he'd go to the curtain, watch match 2, match 3, whatever it is. And he had no problem pulling the guy aside, whoever it was, and said, hey, I watched this, and this. That's caring. That's wanting the team to get better. That's checking your ego and say, hey, man, if this guy's better, we're all better. And Scott did that a lot. I mean, a whole lot. God, yeah, there's knowing we were doing this episode, I was thinking on there's so many little things he taught me on timing. That,
can you give us an example, like just one little random one? I know I'm getting way in the weeds and granular or whatever we joke about, but that example of, hey man, don't just hit the moves, grab a hold so the announcers can put you over. God, that just clicked to me like, oh man, that makes total sense. But I've never heard that explained before. Is there something like that? Maybe another nugget that he dropped on you that you carried with you for the rest of your career?
I don't know that he came up. I don't say he came up with this, but he is the one who impressed upon me, and Sean did. But Scott, because I was working with him, you know what a double down. Boy, this is really inside baseball.
Yeah, we know what a double down is. Yeah.
But you know, if I'm the heel and there's a baby face and you give him a belly to back suplex and both guys are down, Scott said, I know it goes against the grain, but don't move. Like, don't move at all. I'm like, that kind of contrary to selling. You sort of still got to have motion, because if you lay flat, you're dead. Don't dead sell. You know, they're all but it's a nuance that when there's a time to be motionless, see how the silence works? I gave the example is because then you go, what's next?
Yep.
Okay. Well, so if Scott and Jeff are laying completely flat in the ring and nobody's moving and the referee's looking, the fans innately emotionally go, oh shit. Okay. And the timing of the referee getting to 3 and 4 and Earl Hebner, Kyoto's good. All of them were good, but the referee, you talk about conducting an orchestra, and it's literally like the conductor. If everybody's flat and Scott's like, I'm telling you, dude, Jeff, the way we have this pace in this match, don't move. That kind of nuance. And he impressed upon me, hey, you move too soon. Don't move on 2, move on 6 tomorrow night. Okay, I'll give it a shot. It worked. It worked so good that you go, oh, wow. And I know that I've taught numerous guys, hey, trust me, we're going to do this spot. And when we go down, I'm telling you, don't move. Just not a leg, not an ankle, not an arm, not a wrist. Lay flat, dead.
Yeah.
And the people come. That's there's a couple. I mean, there's another one too. We used to do this spot outside. This is back before wireless mics, Conrad. So Chimmel would be at ringside, or the ring announcer would be beside, the cord to the mic, and Scott would go over, and we're fighting outside, and he would buzz the guy and like, Chimmel, turn your mic on. We don't want whatever. Just it's a hot mic. Be ready. And we're fighting over there, and I would pick it up and hit him on the side of the head with it, and it would make a boom, boom. I can't do it with this mic, but I mean a real good sound, and the people would, ooh, but it's one hit. And he said, don't do anything else, Jeff. No punch, no kick, roll in the ring and let that last thing they hear is that sound. And he would lie flat outside, and we'd milk it. And then when the referee started the count, he wouldn't move to let the people sink in. This is going to be a flat ass count out. It didn't move. Is that too inside baseball? Does that make sense?
No, I love it. And that's really what we, the audience, I consider myself the first listener. That's really what we want. And I know it was a little bit of a curveball from what we were planning to talk about, just WrestleMania 11. But when you said you hadn't read The Observer, I wanted to share that story with you because it was so inside baseball that I'd A, never heard it, B, never considered it. Because we as fans, we're interested in the mechanics of how to put together a match and what works and what doesn't work, but more importantly, the why. That's the reason people are listening to this podcast. I mean, candidly, everybody listening to this watched WrestleMania 11 or could turn this off and go watch WrestleMania 11. But they want to hear the story behind the story. So I got to tell you a story then.
I got to tell you a story that kind of relates to this. Doing the meet and greet last night at NWA.
Yeah.
People coming through. We had some podcast listeners, gave out koozies. I would always say, hey, this is on Conrad. It's not on me. These are on Conrad. We had fun with it. But the old proverbial saying, Jeff, I hated you.
Yeah.
And actually, my son hated you because I hated you. And he'd watch you on YouTube and he hated you. But no, that damn Conrad Thompson, he said your story's going to be interesting. And I said, bullshit. You got about 3 months in. And I said, I'm going to give it a shot. He started listening, blah, blah. And I asked him, Conrad, last night, I said, come on now. Now, why did you hate me? He said, anybody could have beat your ass back then. I said, oh, can you care to elaborate there, pal? He goes, oh, God, I wanted to kick your ass and just knew I could do it. And I go, how about that? Job well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, the thing being is in those enhancement matches, and whether it was Pat or Jack Lanza, Chief J Strongbow, those guys in enhancement matches, look, you could go out and do a moveset. And like you said, Scott, I always wanted to take, shout out to Marty Gardner, whoever I was working with, I always wanted to give my enhancement guys probably just push the line where Vince would say, damn, Jeff, you're giving him the whole match. I wanted to push it right up to that, because if the people think the enhancement talent can kick my ass, well, then Razor's going to beat me in 30 seconds. And if I just escape, I win.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was good. NWA was fun last night.
Well, listen, guys, we appreciate you being patient with us. This is really the first time Jeff and I have been able to speak since he's been out of town, and I have too. But we're excited to talk about Royal Rumble. I want to mention briefly, Jeff, we're doing what we can to try to celebrate Scott's legacy. We just did over on adfreeshows.com, and I think it's in one of the podcast feeds. I need to see which one. We did like a tribute to the bad guy, but we're going to be recording as you and I are recording this tomorrow. Jake the Snake, myself, and Diamond Dallas Page are all going to have probably the most emotional conversation about Scott Hall ever. So if you're looking for more Scott Hall content, let me recommend DDP Snake Pit. I don't reckon it'll air this week, but maybe next week. It's going to be, I'm trying to gear up for it, because just as the podcast you and I did, I did an Ask Conrad Anything last week, Jeff, and somebody said, hey, what's the most important podcast, or the one where when you clicked stop, where you were like, hey, if I never do another one, I could go out happy with that one. I named our Owen episode because that wasn't really a podcast. That was an emotional experience. And that's what I expect this one to be. So if you're looking for more Scott Hall content, not just about wrestling, but there will be wrestling in there, but about the guy.
Yep.
Tune in to DDP Snake Pit. It's free anywhere you enjoy podcasts, not behind a paywall. We want everybody to see it because the crew over there at DDP's place, they do a great job on the video too. So it'll be on YouTube, but everywhere you enjoy podcasts. But today's topic is about WrestleMania 11. Let's get into it. Coming out of Royal Rumble, it's your first run as the assistant manager of the WWF. You've got the Intercontinental title. You beat Razor for that title, and you can hear about that in the archives. But did you know coming out of the Rumble, hey, we're going to run it back with Razor at WrestleMania? Did you know it was a rematch for WrestleMania already?
I knew it was a good shot at it. As we get into talking about the finish of Mania, but winning it at Rumble, it was a natural. Man, I hate to say the glory days of pay-per-view, but I say that tongue in cheek, in that there was Royal Rumble, and then you didn't have another big show till Mania, and you had really good time to build. But yeah, when I won it at Rumble, I knew that we were probably going back to it. Candidly, I thought that's where I was dropping it back to him at. All right, time for another little timeout, little break. And that's kind of something I'm going to segue into, talking about taking a break. Have you ever had somebody in your life that needs to take a break? Matter of fact, needs to break a bad habit? I have. Several folks through the years that I've been around. I have politely, sometimes unpolitely, sometimes suggested, sometimes asked, sometimes tried to give them 15 different reasons to quit. And you know what? A lot of times they would, but cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there is a much better way to break your bad habits. I wish I had Fume around back when I was making these suggestions to some of my old riding buddies. We're not talking about some weird mind voodoo from your crazy neighbor. We're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong. So instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. Telling you what, first time you tried it, the flavor is off the charts. The feel, they say, is it's weighted, it's perfectly balanced, it's fun to fidget with, and the look, beautiful real wood, and the shape, you're just going to feel cool using it. So stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy and enjoyable and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories. And there's no reason that can't be you or your loved one. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. head to tryfume.com. That's right. It's try, T-R-Y, fume, F-U-M.com. TRYFUM.com and use code MyWorld to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's right. Try FUM.com and use code MyWorld to save an additional 10% off your order today. Try Fume. I want to say that one more time. TRYFUM.com and use code MyWorld to save an additional 10% off today. Give it a folks try, and you will be doing someone in your life an enormous lifetime favor.
So I don't know that we've talked about this before, but I know there's a pretty infamous story out there that you were supposed to be a part of WrestleMania 10, because WrestleMania 11 does wind up being your first WrestleMania, but you're backstage with all your shit on, ready to do your thing at WrestleMania 10. And I'll be darned, what do you know? Shawn Michaels went a little long at WrestleMania. Don't know that there's ever been a precedent for that, but it happened. And really, we're thankful it did, because the ladder match with him and Razor Ramon is probably going to exceed any sort of memory that we would have ever had about you and Rick Martel, IRS, the Head Shrinkers, Tatanka, 1, 2, 3 Kid, Sparky Plug, and the Smoking Guns. Don't get me wrong. That's a nice way to get 10 guys at WrestleMania payday and get them featured. But they created absolute magic that went 18 minutes and change. But it had to be, even if you're friends with Shawn, and even if you're friends with Scott, because we're at least pretending for the rest of this show that you were part of the clique. I'm sure you were like a little bit disappointed. Hey, it's my WrestleMania moment. I'm in Madison Square Garden. I got my shit on. I'm ready to do my thing. But when you see the match, you're like, well, that's kind of hard to be mad, right?
I was like many folks backstage, glued to the monitor. Now you got to remember, I started in October.
Right.
Started on the road end of December. So January, February, March. I hadn't been there long, and I was watching Randy Savage pace. Mike wasn't real happy with them going overtime.
No.
And I just sort of like, okay, but the match was so good, and I knew that the 10-man tag was, for lack of a better word, scrambled eggs. It was so easy to prepare for because all of us had like one spot.
Yeah.
It was, but so I wasn't emotionally invested into the body of the match. And I don't know who came up and told me, maybe an IRS. He's like, Jeff, we'll get paid. Don't worry. That something will come out of this. But we didn't really know it was cut until like, as the ladder match was over. I mean, so the match was awesome. God, the drama in that building. To this day, watching that match back, two of the best to ever do it.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. So I wasn't pissed off. I was just kind of like a deer in the headlights, if you will, a young kid like, is our match really going to get cut? Okay.
It is kind of fun to think about, though. Your match got cut at WrestleMania 10 because Razor went too long. Mm-hmm. And now you beat Razor for the Intercontinental title at the Royal Rumble. And you might be taking on the guy who was in the match that got your match cut at the next year's WrestleMania. It's kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
The night after the Royal Rumble, you're in a King's Court segment with Jerry Lawler. And Lawler asks you about what can we expect from the Ain't I Great tour. And you challenge Diesel to a match. So you're technically the number 2 heel in the company behind Shawn Michaels. And your first night as Intercontinental Champion, you challenge the world champion. What would you think of that booking?
Conrad, before I get into the booking, let me give you a little story behind the story.
Please do.
All right. So obviously the WWF machine had gotten behind old Double J at this point with the lighted up outfit, right? And that lighted up outfit, doing an in-ring with the King's Court, all fired up, Roadie. Man, this is the road to WrestleMania. I mean, we were really fired up. And Conrad, I go to the ring, and before you walk through the curtain backstage, the scenic and props folks are there, and I had a switch on my hat to start the light up hat, and I had a switch inside my jacket to get the lights on my jacket cranked up. And I'm strolling on down to the ring, and I am all ready to go and get up in the ring. Lawler, I wish he tells this story funnier than me, because as I'm sitting there talking to him, I'm sort of shaking my shoulders, and he's like, He wasn't really sure what was going on, but I'm moving my shoulders. Conrad, the padding in there had moved or whatever. And so there's 2 hot wires. Literally, you can look on my shoulder right now. It's singed, burnt with 2 big blisters on my shoulder as I'm doing the in-ring. You can go back and kind of watch it. I think I did a pretty good cover-up job, but went out and did that promo. I pat myself on the back. I performed under incredible pain and stress, and that thing burned the shit out of my left shoulder. But so that was the promo. And Lawler was like, back, I'm like, Jerry, did you run? He goes, no, but what the hell's going on? And this is later. And I go, look at my shoulder. He's like, what? Anyway, Lawler tells that story funny, but yeah, we had kicked things off, and Big Daddy Cool, he was rolling into Mania, and it was good times. I mean, it was I don't call it the Rocket, but the old assistant general manager was rolling at this time, and they had really put the ball in me and Road Dogg's hands, and they really liked the package. It just clicked, and winning the title at Rumble, and then we're off to the races, and the act was very hot.
Let's talk about what's next for you. You're going to be working with Razor in West Palm Beach on a Superstars taping. You'll be working with Adam Bomb in North Fort Myers for Wrestling Challenge. You're going to lose by DQ to Razor after the Roadie interferes, and you get the win over Adam Bomb. You got 5,000 fans there for West Palm Beach. You need a ref bump and some Roadie interference to beat the Adam Bomb character. What'd you think of working with Adam Bomb? That's a name we don't hear talked about very much.
I like Brian Clark. I just recently saw him in Albany. They had the office, or Vince had high hopes for him. As you can tell, the IC champ was using, but that was the package of Double J and the Roadie to pull out all the stops and all that. But they were pushing old Brian. I like Brian. Good dude.
Back on the road, you're working Diesel in Baltimore in front of 2,500 fans, Razor in Hershey, Niagara Falls, Quebec, Montreal. Montreal's a big crowd, 12,113 fans. Any memories of working these loops with Razor here?
The Montreal show, and as I was looking at the research, Conrad, and as we both know, we've been super busy, and WWE Live and Lucky Horseshoes and NWA and Beach and driving and all that. But this run here, there was a rib played in North Charleston on me and Roadie. But it was all in all, it was a good time. The Montreal show, that's for another podcast. There was that market, and we've talked about that. It always did good, but there was something going on. I'm saying in a positive way. I don't know if it was Jacques, so it's 95. Anyway, that's a hell of a house. 12,000 fans at a live event. That wasn't TV. That was a hell of a live event. Business was good. You just said 5 in West Palm. Business was really, and when you do comparative, and that was another thing I was going to get Derek, but I just been busy. Business was trending up in 95. It's WrestleMania season, but business is trending up in all those markets.
So we should mention these house show tours are different, right? Because, well, there are no real house show tours anymore. I mean, there are, but not really. WWE's running just a handful. You guys were running and gunning in this era. And back then there was no pay-per-view between a Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. We know now we've got a January, February, March show. That's just not the case here. You're back on the road with Razor, working him in Pittsburgh. 5,000 fans and change. Easy for me to say. 5,000 fans and change there. Scranton is a sellout. It's a smaller building, but still 2,500. And the Scranton CYO shows have always been joked about in shoot interviews by a bunch of guys. What do you think of these Scranton shows? You got any good Scranton stories?
Well, I mean, to put it all in context, and this is why I love doing the podcast for a lot of reasons, but this is one when you really drill down in what you just said. So Royal Rumble in January, Mania in April. So you have like a rock and roll tour. We were out on tour. We were grinding it. We were doing TVs, but lots of live events, AKA house shows. And it's before social media. So I say all that to say that, yes, there was the Meltzer and Keller and the sheets and all that, you know, and the early days of the internet. But for the most part, this was, I'll call it this is my post-grad work. I'll call it that, Conrad, if we're going to give a school analogy, because I'm working with Scott every night. And when you can go from West Palm to Baltimore to Hershey to, you know, all these different towns with the same opponent and try little nuances and try different things. And it's how the industry was done, is that we're going to have this match, and I'm leading somewhere with this rabbit hole, Conrad. By the time you get to Mania, I've worked with Scott 30 or 40 times, and we've tried little nuances of this, and this, of what worked and didn't work. And we're going to, you know, put, you know, a piece of this and that. It just all sort of gelling together. But it was how the business was done. And yes, it was a lot of bumps and a lot of travel and all that, but man, it's how you really get good at your craft. It's just that simple. But, you know, you called, Catholic youth. Yeah. See, what'd you call it? CYO shows?
CYO. Yeah.
Yeah. That stands for Catholic Youth Center. And that says it all, that, you know, it had, you know, church officials were a part of it. And let's face it, you know, it's right in the heart of the old WWF territory and not too far removed from the steroid trial and sort of black eye. But I'll say this, it was a building that was rocking and rolling, but just still kind of ironic that the Catholic Youth Center had professional wrestling in it. And, you know, I don't remember how many times, but all the agents would say, yeah, this guy got in trouble for cussing backstage, or you can't say this, and this talent, you know, it was just a different venue to run. But always, I'll say always, but it was a hell of a house, always, and a blast to work in. When you've got 2,500 people crammed into a building, it's a lot of fun to work in.
You're working second from the top at the Spectrum, working against Diesel with Roadie and Sean in your corner. Diesel gets the win, but Michaels hits him with a super kick afterwards. Of course, they're going to be the main event of WrestleMania, February 18th. Unfortunately, a little sad news. Eddie Gilbert passes away. Eddie Gilbert really became the wrestling star that we know in Memphis, and he had success in other areas, but what a great mind for the business. Everyone said that this guy, you know, could have been a major influencer, but his life was cut way too short, way too soon. You got any good Eddie Gilbert stories you can share with us?
Oh, I don't know if it's a good one, but he's one of the first guys that I personally knew that left us too soon for the wrong I mean, there's never a right reason, but, you know, passed away. And Eddie came back. Okay, let me back up. My grandfather, Eddie Marlin, my dad's father-in-law, was a promoter, and everybody knows him through the Memphis TV, or a lot of folks know him if you hear the word Eddie Marlin. But in his wrestling days, his tag team partner was Tommy Gilbert, which is Eddie's father. So the Gilberts and the JArretts and the Marlins, I mean, I grew up knowing Eddie and Doug, and it was just, you know, second and third generation and all that. So when I broke in, Eddie was away, and I don't know, you know, he's working around, but, you know, I knew that Eddie had worked and been successful, and wasn't a real big guy, but I looked up to him as far as, okay, this guy's traveled around, but then when he came back, Eddie's sort of attention to booking and detail, and we would, on our spot shows, I was used to working in a spot show, maybe 10, 12 minutes, and just going out and having a good spot show match and entertaining the fans and doing it. Eddie would go into these spot shows, and he's booking or assistant booking or whatever, and 5 matches on a card, 2 matches intermission, 2 matches intermission, and then main event. And me and Eddie, he's like, hey man, I'm going to give us a lot of time on this. Here's the finish. And me and Eddie would do 30-minute in the main event, 30-minute time limit draws, Conrad. And we would go to a draw as the main event. And then we're doing all this, and he scoots out the way Psychology US scoots out, and he would have me ask for 5 more minutes, and we would go almost 5 minutes, and then he'd let me catch him a 1, 2, 3. And you talk about really making the people want to see a finish. Eddie was really, really good. And you talk about a talent that had Eddie, he's one of those guys that I think, had he not had his demons, just in a creative circle, where would he have gone? Whether it was WCW or whether it would have been with WWF or wherever it may be. But Eddie had a real bright mind, loved the business. And this is back in the payphone days. But when I heard the news, I can remember calling his father, Tommy, and just sorry for your loss, condolences and all that. And I was at a payphone in Maine. What is the town in Maine? But anyway, payphone.
Bangor, Maine.
Yeah, but went through, this is another thing. Why I remember this, I have no idea, but go through security, and I knew I'd got to the airport early. I'm going to get through security so I can get through it and use the phone. Other side of security, called and talked a few minutes, and it was just like a gut wrenching, like, damn, just gone too soon. A young man. Wow.
You get to work with Diesel in Auburn Hills, which is a big deal because, Kevin Nash is the world champ. You're also in the Heartbreak Hotel with Shawn earlier in the night. You got to feel pretty happy with your spot. I mean, I know a lot of times whenever we've talked about your WWE experience, we often get to a spot where you weren't happy creatively, or you didn't feel like your career was exactly trending in the right direction. But that's not the case here, is it?
Conrad, I'm 27, 28. And IC champ, and on 2 or 3 times, even a live event, a Heartbreak Hotel, main event, maybe run in on Shawn's match or whatever it may be. I was having the time of my life in so many ways. I'd been in the territory for 7 years, and I knew I'd paid my dues and learned my craft and all that. And I have felt an obligation to the family business. But then I get to the WWF and do the building process. And Vince said, we're going to give this thing a year. And I'm going, oh my God, a year. But okay. But now here it is. Just as Vince said, it's 95. It's rocking and rolling. Me and the Roadie in main events and semi-main events, making great money. Life couldn't have gotten much better for old Double J during this run as far as the professional side.
So your match against Diesel is live on Raw from Macon, Georgia. And the Observer wrote this: Diesel kept the title, beating Jeff Jarrett in a good match, and a lot of credit should go to Jarrett for carrying him, not so much because Diesel was that bad, but because they worked the match standing up, and the size difference was just incredible, yet they did a decent job with it. So how about that? Meltzer putting you over a little bit. What do you remember about your matches with Kevin? It feels like a lot of times, they try to do, when you have a big guy like that, a David and Goliath type story. What was your experience like working with Diesel here in 95?
Me and Kev hit it off from day one. Man, I feel for Kev right there in this time too, because you just think of, I'm sorry to, but you just think of, they met each other 30 something years ago.
So yeah, 3-decade-long friendship, brotherhood, really.
Yeah, it's a different kind of deal. And look, me and Kevin buds, and me and Scott are buds, and Shawn, and you sort of come up that way. But when you're thinking about Scott and Kevin, the WCW, Diamond Stud, Master Blaster, Oz days, they, go to the show, and Diesel and Razor are formed, and then they leave and had just uber success and all through these years, and go back, and they were with us at TNA for a period. But just those two, it's my heart goes out to Kev. But shit, I got lost. What were we talking about, Kev?
Well, just what your type of matches, putting matches together with Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin Nash. Me and Kev hit it off personally, but in as far as in the ring. And here's what Kev, I'll just never forget the first few times he said it. Hey, dude, hit me with that sweet punch and I'll sell my ass off. And Kevin, long hair, he got a lot of mileage out of my punch. That's the chemistry we had. Kevin didn't mind selling. He wasn't going to bump all around. That wouldn't look right, but Kevin knew how to work a big man, and we had our A match, B match, and C match, and we always had fun. It always delivered, and that I remember that TV match well in Macon, and backstage, everybody was really happy with it. I was happy with it. And me and Kevin were like, yeah, we've done this a few times kind of deal. But yeah, it was, again, things were clicking.
As a reminder, WrestleMania 11 is not just about Shawn Michaels and Diesel. It's also about getting Hall of Famer Lawrence Taylor in the mix. He's going to be working with Bam Bam Bigelow. You're a big sports guy. How cool was it to see LT hanging around the wrestling biz?
It was unbelievable when that thing started to roll out. And I'm like, Bam Bam is he's the perfect opponent. And again, I'm a sports junkie, and you start hearing, hey, there's going to be football players and Salt and Pepper is going to sing because they were a part of this mania. And it was the big time. They didn't have NFL great in Memphis co-headlining WrestleMania with a press conference in Times Square and everything we're going to talk about. It was really cool, Conrad. Again, I'm 26, 27, 28, being a part of all this. And it's just, the realization that, okay, this is at the very tippy top of this industry, like big time. And I love WCW, born and raised on that, but they just didn't have the Vince McMahon machine that created the spectacles. This was a spectacle. All right, folks, let's take another break here. Hope you're enjoying the podcast, and also hope you're enjoying the ad reads. And I actually kind of hate to call them ad reads because our sponsors have truly become part of our family. And speaking about a sponsor that has really become a huge part, certainly of my family, it's none other than AG1. And it is, I don't think my words are going to do it justice, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about my daily habit. And yes, it has become a daily habit. Back, 4 or 5 months ago, me and my tag partner, Jay Lethal, got in from a flight, and I actually, believe it or not, jumped over behind the steering wheel, and I'm driving, and I see him with his bottle of water, and he starts getting his shaker out, and he gets out AG1, and I looked over at him, and I'm like, Jay, I had no idea. And he goes, yes, this is a part of my daily routine. I said, well, I call it my daily habit. You call it your routine. I call it my habit. Folks, AG1. I cannot say enough good things about it because, it improves digestion and mental clarity and focus. But I think for me, I'm kind of blowing and going from 5:15 a.m. till, 9 or 10 o'clock at night. That's when I'm not on the road trying to get things done. Wife, 5 kids, baseball, gaming, wrestling, you name it, all over the place. I really think I try to create every boost of energy, every edge I possibly can, stay in the gym, get my good sleep, do everything I need to do. But I always try to really focus on what is that one thing that I know that others aren't doing on a consistent basis. And they always talk about, the different nutrients in food and everything. Well, like I said a second ago, AG1 has over 75 high quality ingredients, and they're key. They're key ingredients that really, the 3 things that they really do, they support energy, our focus, and mental clarity. And that is something that I experience day in, day out. So when I roll out of bed, I do me about a 15 minutes stretching routine. And then my next step literally is every morning I take my AG1. I get it on my stomach before anything else so I can make sure that I absorb not only the AG1, but it helps with absorption throughout my day. And I'm sure people that are listening to this, riding up and down the road, or maybe, on an airplane, wherever you're listening to this podcast, you're thinking to yourself, as Conrad would say, self, Double J, Last Outlaw, what the heck does AG1 really cost? Well, I'm going to lay something on you right now that if you've got a better half, and I'll call her my better half, like Queen of the Mountain Karen, she likes to go by her, I'll call it coffee shops, and get her lattes and folks like that. And if you've ever seen a receipt from one of those places, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or, if you go into, I don't know, there's all kinds of different things where you can blow $20, $30, $15, $10 at a drip of that. AG1. It is literally, you want to know the cost of AG1? It's less than $3 a day. Hell, that's less than a toll booth on some places I go now. And what I'm telling you is that it is a habit that is a super win-win for yourself. I mean, for your better half, for your entire family. And I'm telling you, it is just truly something that is, a lot of ways for me, a game changer. $3 a day. So if you want a comprehensive solution, if that's what you're looking for in your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Folks, I have it on repeat. My order comes to the house every month like clockwork. But, if you want to try it, you'll get in. Like I said, you'll get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs. But how do you do it? You go to drinkag1.com/myworld. I'm going to say that again. drinkag1.com/myworld. Check it out. I guarantee you'll love it. You got to stay consistent. You got to make sure that you take it. I would suggest taking it at the same time every day. But no, you got to give this thing a try, because it literally is something that you want to edge in life. This will give you an edge in life. Folks, one more time, drinkag1.com/myworld. Go now. Thanks.
Do you feel like your program with Razor is a little lost in the shuffle as a result? I mean, for a long time, it felt like you have your WrestleMania A story, which is your main event and your world title. And then your B story, which is why we joke about it so often, is the Intercontinental Championship match. Now, though, the world title's not going on last. It's a football player and Bam Bam Bigelow, and you're still in the mix. But you do see some sour grapes from guys every now and again who say, oh, these outsiders coming in, taking our spot, taking our paydays. We've been on the road our whole year and blah, blah, blah. But then you see other guys who are like, wait a minute, wearing a promoter hat. I disagree with that. I'm curious your take, because you get to wear both hats on this show. The son of a promoter, the grandson of a promoter. And now, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, you're a promoter too. But back when you were in your mid-20s with the IC strap and you realize, man, at best, I'm in the third most talked about match as opposed to the second, rub you the wrong way? Or did you see that LT coming in was going to be better for everybody?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to the spectacle effect that Madison Square Garden live event or Boston Garden live event or wherever it may be. I looked at those probably as shows or events, but Mania and Rumble, they're spectacles. You have a Pam Anderson, you have a Mike Tyson, you have all these pop culture kind of deals. And again, me being a sports junkie, LT wasn't just good. He was like a whole nother level great. And we were in the New York City market. And so LT and being a giant, and there's going to be other all pros surrounding him, and Bam Bam, and just kind of the lineup. I never gave that like, oh man, they're going to bump me down to third. But, I always looked at spectacle and the world title match of Kevin and Sean. Look, it's a hell of a spot to be number 3 on the card. I never looked down about it.
So the next night in Augusta, it's a Superstars taping. You're going to team with Tatanka to take on Razor and Luger. It's a losing effort. Is this your first time working with Lex?
It's a 95. I'm trying to think if I would have worked with him in 94. Maybe a few times in 94.
What was it like being in the ring with Lex?
No, I mean, he came to Louisville as the narcissist when I was still in the territory. So
Okay.
no, it wasn't, damn, Lex was so strong. I mean, the first thing coming to my mind in 93, 94, 95 is Scott Hall used to say, JArrett, you're the heaviest 220 pounder alive. Would you please give me some help? And I'd say, Lex doesn't need help.
You know what? It turns out you've wrestled him quite a bit in 94. You even on the Superstars taping, not just the international tour, but you did a big international tour with him. But you had a qualifying match where you beat Lex Luger by count out back in 94. You're exactly right. You worked with him in a tag match in Memphis. and then in a singles event in Louisville back in '93. So I'll be darned. How about that?
Yeah, quite a few times. But no, I'm trying to. I chuckle though. That's one of the thoughts I had on the beach, is that Scott, one of his moves set was the sack of shit. He just you know, body catches you and then fall away slam, I guess is the technical move for it. But when I would jump into place for that, I would, I guess, be a little heavier than Scott cared for. He's a strong man. But anyway, also on slams or whatever, Scott would always rib me and say, "You are the heaviest 225 pounder." And I got it down where Lex never complained ever. Is he stronger? It's just a little back and forth. So, but Lex, good God Almighty, he could press slam me like no tomorrow.
What do you think of Tatanka? You only worked with him a handful of times. I think this is the last time you'll be in the ring with him. We don't talk about Tatanka a lot here on the program.
So it's a different era. You know, we talked about Adam Bomb and IRS and the head shrinkers, just the mode of gimmicks or personas. I'm the singing cowboy and Diesel's the truck driver and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. I loved it when I wish, and look, you know, I don't say Chris is the best or the worst promo, but I think if they would have fine-tuned his promo skills as a heel Tatanka, I thought that could have gone places. I do. I think the babyface, yeah, it had its run, but it was a lot of ways very stereotypical, even though Chris is Indian. He's, you know, but I think they would have had to have done more with it. But as a heel, man, I thought they had that had the potential to have a lot of legs on it.
Let's talk about the WrestleMania press conference. It happens at the Harley Davidson Cafe in New York City, and you're not there. That just feels weird to me. I mean, I guess it's all about those other two matches, but were you a little disappointed that you didn't get to be a part of a WrestleMania presser like this? I
have a strong feeling that I was racking my brain actually this morning doing cardio, Conrad, why I wasn't there. Maybe I wasn't booked, or maybe I was. So to build this whole build, Conrad, from really about October, November, December of the prior year, but, you know, certainly into January, February, March, April, and then in July, I was just on a grind. I was on so many on sales and media appearances, and I was they had me going everywhere, quote unquote, on my off days. So if I wasn't at the Mania appearance, I could have been at some kind of live event, on sale or charity or something like that. I don't really recall why I wasn't there, but then it could have been on the flip side. If you have Bam Bam and LT and Sean and Kevin and Vince and one other, maybe a female, there's no room.
Yeah. So there's an interesting house show that goes down in San Bernardino in early March. Dan Cortez of MTV fame is in Diesel's corner for a tag match where he teams up with The Undertaker to take on you and Bam Bam. And of course you take the pin. What'd you think of old Dan?
San Bernardino is what you said, right?
Yep.
I'm going to go down to that name. Whenever I hear this, Conrad, I'm going way off beat here, right? But on the back of a plane, rarely did we take Southwest flights, but we had a group flight with a bunch of talent. Scott was on there and Owen was on there. And we were at the very back of the plane, and folks that were a part of this flight, that you may have even heard this story. But have I told this story, Conrad? Do you know?
I don't believe so.
Okay. But anyway, Scott Hall he fake laughed, and then he got seriously laughing and tickled, at which everybody tickled, and the flight attendant. So Owen nonchalantly pan face says, "Now, where did you say we're going?" And she goes, "San Bernardino. You on the right flight?" He goes, "San Bernardino. That's where this flight's going." And the Southwest, and you know how Southwest flights are. They're well, you probably don't. You're on first class Delta, but no, you know, they're happy, jovial, just gonna have a great time. And she's like, and Owen goes, "Can you spell that for me, please?" And she goes, SANBER. Owen would go, no. I think it's B. Wait, do you have a pen and paper? And she's like, "Well, I'll get you one." And Conrad, this went on for like 15 minutes. And then Owen's going, Scott, how do you spell this? And Owen's like, anyway, it went on and on and on. But that was a Scott Hall, Owen Hart rib story. San Bernardino. But back to course. Anyway, it's a great Owen Hart. The simplest rib that nobody any harm. And the poor stewardess really thought she was helping Owen out, that he really wanted to care, know how to spell San Bernardino. And Owen was just literally passing time. So enough of that. Another integration of, it was there wasn't a lot to it. I don't even remember why he was a part of it, but there was some kind of entertainment, Hollywood relations. But he was cool. It wasn't a big deal. It was a one and done.
So the final build of WrestleMania, somehow Barry Horowitz gets involved. Meltzer would write this. Barry Horowitz did an interview for an IC title match with Jeff Jarrett, saying he's talked with Razor Ramon and knows all of Jarrett's weaknesses. Cornette said Horowitz's one-loss record was 0 and forever. Since they had no video walls, the fans live were actually in the dark after the storyline, so they didn't react the way they should to have Horowitz gaining the early near pins. Fans live saw it as nothing but a squash match, and Jarrett isn't nearly as over as he should be with his push, but it was actually good for its storyline on television. This is suspect at best booking. Here you are, the Intercontinental Champion. Here's a talent who has seemingly never won a match. Mm-hmm. Fans know that he's never won a match. Mm-hmm. And now he's giving you the what for. What'd you think?
One word comes to mind thinking about this: maintenance.
Yeah.
They were maintenance in the storyline because there was no need for me and Scott to, the story was set. I beat him at Rumble. We're going to get to Mania. So don't overdo physicality. Don't overdo talking. Have a little sidebar, have a little story with it. The whole world knew, as you said, Barry Horowitz was at the very tip top of the food chain with enhancement talent. Barry lived here in the Nashville area for years and years and years. Jack Hart, Stretcher Jack Hart, or Barry Horowitz. But and Barry can work. So it was a TV, we call it a quick TV storyline that helped continue the build, if you will, of Razor and Double J, and didn't hurt anybody. But taking it face value, Meltzer had to get the jab in. He put me over in the making match, and Jarrett's just not nearly as over as he should be. Old Dave. Good old Dave.
Well, later in the show, you agree to a rematch with Horowitz, but Bob Backlund attacks Horowitz and signs the contract instead. So now there's going to be a March to WrestleMania program that's going to give you like a little special, little extra, little lagniappe, as some might say. It's not Monday Night Raw. It is a special, and it's Jeff Jarrett versus Bob Backlund. In the meantime, Razor's cut promos saying he's upset that now his rematch may not take place if Jarrett loses, and the IC title could be up for grabs now between Brett and Backlund at WrestleMania. And that leads to Razor interfering. Meltzer had this to say. Jarrett versus Backlund for the title was awful, but the post-match was very good. Bob worked as the face as far as the spots went, but did the heel facials. Nobody cared at all about the match, even though Jarrett was really selling great. Backlund had Jarrett set up for the chicken wing when Ramon attacked Backlund for the DQ. No doubt the storyline being he wanted to make sure Jarrett was still the champ for WrestleMania, quote unquote, next week. Meltzer gave it half a star. What'd you think here of this creative and your chance to work with Bob Backlund, a former legend, but a lot of people look at this run here and think, maybe not the right time or place.
I always love talking to Bob, working with Bob, the TNA, brought him to TNA, all this, but good God Almighty, it was such a, okay. So growing up in a wrestling household, Lawler was the king, and you got to see Flair from time to time, or Harley, and old Tommy Rich Wildfire went down to Atlanta. He became champ. And, you hear of, okay, maybe the Von Erichs. Anyway, but looking at Bob Backlund in a magazine. That's the first time I ever saw Bob. He didn't strike at, you saw Bruno, years ago, Bruno, but then you see Backlund, he just didn't look like, okay, he's sort of got short hair. He looked like, in a lot of ways, I don't say accountant, but just, he looked like an office worker in tights, but stout and strong as an ox. But then insert him in, and the Survivor Series with him and Brett, and now here we are. What is this? 4 months later, it was such a fish out of water character that Backlund had all this history, but then he did the silly facials, and I don't know. It was just really, it was difficult because was he a heel? Was he a baby face? Like I said, coming off the Brett storyline, but now he's sort of interjected into this. Different kind of deal, to say the least, but maintenancing again, me and Razor.
So some more tag matches take place before Mania between the Clique. It's in Fresno, 9,000 fans, Thunder Bay, 2,800 fans, Maple Leaf Gardens, and then 10,000 folks at MSG. So the crowds are picking up. You're working in a top spot. Is this the most money you've made in the business at this point?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, good houses, because again, that's where, comparatively speaking, 93, 94, 95, the live event business, when you sort of look at it from a real historical perspective, the live event business was picking up pre-Attitude Era. So that's coming off the steroid era and, WCW live events. Eric, I'm sure you guys have gone into great detail when Eric just said, enough, quit running shows. This is crazy. But here we are in 95, and things were picking up, and the strategy was picking up, and the in-market marketing, and there was a good concerted effort that let's get the houses up, and they were. And so the payoffs were reflective. Yes, it was the most money I'd ever made in my career, because live event payoffs, it's a lot different payoff working against Doink and Razor Ramon. I'll just say that.
Talk me through that. Like, we know that you're paid off the house, but I guess I'm asking, like, let's say you worked Madison Square Garden this Saturday night. When do you find out how much you got paid for that? A week later, a month later, a day later?
Probably 3 weeks later.
And it just shows up in the mail, or they hand it to you at TV?
Oh, TV. You get mail, checks. A lot of times back in those days, again, pre cell phone, and it's like your checks come in the mail, and guys walk in the dressing room. Did y'all get paid? My mail, it wasn't in my check. Yeah, I got mine today. So it was, staggered within about 2 or 3 days when checks went out. So yeah, I mean, it was about a 3 week delay on live event.
But and a lot of that, just so our listeners understand, is because somebody like a Ticketmaster, say, they would not reconcile that until after the event. So it's not like that day the company saw that amount of money. They know what's coming in. They could get a report, but they have to get all the credit cards processed, all the checks cut. So once the WWF gets their money, then they go ahead and make sure that you guys are paid.
In those days, it's crazy. I mean, this is, I don't say, when was FedEx founded? Regardless, Dave Hebner would have to find, he would send the arena checks off the following day, get it back to Titan Towers. You got to deposit, you got to reconcile. Yeah. So it was a process of about 3 weeks.
But it's almost a little kind of nerve wracking, I imagine, if you've got a kid who's near the end of their high school career, they get a little piece of mail and then they're nervous to open it. Did I get into this college? Right. There's this anticipation of what's inside this envelope.
Sure.
It's kind of the same thing here, because you don't know what it is until you open it up. Right.
Exactly. I mean, but as things were grooving, everything's relative. So, not till, and we've documented this, but I mean, once, I'll say 94, I kind of had a pretty good idea on what that check would be. Okay. The house was great in Dortmund, Germany. I'm probably going around 1,500 or whatever it was, or $2,000. Ooh, wait a minute. So I had to do the Canadian blue check run, and I did Sudbury, and I did Barrie, and I did this town and that town. Okay. It's going to be in Canadian dollars, and it's going to be 500 a shot, 600, 700, 800, whatever it may be. You had a good guesstimate. Only shows like a Garden or a Boston Garden or something like that you're hoping it goes from, I don't know, 2,500 to 3, whatever it is.
You're back on the road in Detroit at the Joe Louis Arena and then the Boston Garden. You're a nostalgia guy. You've been all over at this point. You've hit all the major arenas for the WWF, the MSGs, the Philly Spectrums, the Joe Louis Arenas, the Boston Garden. Did any stand out as favorites for you?
Well, me and Scott were in a ladder match in the very last wrestling event in Boston Garden. And it was, oh man. I mean, and back up even further. When the old Boston Garden, when you would drive up the ramp, it's a wooden ramp and it sounds like a rickety, I mean, a ton of noise, but look, I was a huge Larry Bird. I was a huge Boston fan. And so during the 80s, I'm watching all those Celtics Lakers finals or Celtics Pistons Eastern Conference finals, or Larry Legend hit 65, whatever it is, Boston Garden, and then get to perform in that building and then get the word out, whether it was 3 or 4 months, hey, you're going to be on the very last Boston Garden wrestling show. And then for it to be a ladder match in a featured match against Scott in a very marquee match, I mean, that's, didn't call it a bucket list back then, but man, are you kidding me? It was, I loved it. I absolutely, it's to this day, to be able to say, yes, I was in whatever, semi-main event or whatever it was, but against Razor in a ladder match in the Boston Garden.
It's a big deal.
Big for me.
So you get to be the main event of the WrestleMania 11 public workout. It's at Times Square, Canyon of Heroes. It's where you're going to wrestle Tony Roy until you finally go Diesel into the ring. He ends up power bombing the Roadie. But how cool of a moment is this in your career? Here's this kid from Hendersonville, Tennessee, getting off the lake, getting on a plane. Now he's in Times Square in a fucking wrestling ring.
Where the ball drops, Conrad.
Not just walking around taking pictures like a tourist. No, there is a wrestling ring set up in Times Square, and now you're in it. This has to be like, is this real life?
Oh shit. Excuse me. Yeah. A little sidebar. Do you have the rundown for that press conference? Because it's only because it's in Times Square. So Zeb, Uncle Zeb, was managing the Blues, Eli and Jacob, and they were a part of this workout. And you know, if old Dutchman takes off his glasses, he can't see very well. And so the ring being set up on Times Square wasn't exactly like it would be in an arena. So it's on the street and this and that. So old Dutch, leading his boys to battle and leading them to a big brawl, he walks up the steps that are going into the ring, and the ring steps and the post are a little bit separated. And Dutch goes to take a steps, and boom, his leg goes all the way down, and he's stuck. He's straddling, he nuts himself. One leg's on the ground and one leg's between the post and the steps. That's my funny Times Square, but oh man, funny time. Dutch tells that story. It's hilarious. But anyway, yeah, Conrad, are you kidding me? I see Champ, Times Square, public workout, LT. I mean, the whole vibe. And again, this is, it's so hard to give the analogy today because it's before social media. So you have press there, it's a different thing. Not everybody's got a flip phone or camera, but when you have a boatload of press that are covering this spectacle and you're actually doing a performance, it was surreal to me. I mean, completely surreal to me that I'm going to go wrestle in Times Square for a public workout for WrestleMania. It's really cool. And the press that was around.
It's got to be a pretty damn cool moment for you personally and professionally. And before Mania, Keller would write this about your match, quote, Razor Ramon faces Jeff Jarrett in a test for both wrestlers. if the WWF is serious in saying they want to stress work rate to a much greater degree than any time in the past, both wrestlers have something to prove. JArrett has been somewhat of a disappointment in the ring thus far, with only a few standout matches. His lack of bump taking and USWA punch oriented style didn't work well with other WWF wrestlers when he first arrived. Given how much Ramon has improved the last 2 years, JArrett has no excuse not to be one half of a 4-star effort. The angle the last 2 weeks with Ramon coveting in a heelish way this chance at the Intercontinental title added some depth to Ramon's character. Look for the 1, 2, 3 kid and Roadie at ringside to add to the histrionics. Did you feel like this was like, I mean, obviously it's a dream come true to be at a WrestleMania and have an Intercontinental title match and be working with a guy like Razor Ramon. But did you feel the pressure? Because I just want to add context. The last time we saw Razor Ramon at WrestleMania, he's standing atop a ladder with an Intercontinental title in each hand. We're still talking about it all these years later. There is some pressure. This is what he did with Shawn last year. What's he going to do this year? It's again for the Intercontinental title, but it's not a ladder match. But you got some big shoes here to fill, do you not? There's some pressure.
I don't think I looked at it as big shoes to fill, but we were on I'll say I'm talking about me, Razor, and Roadie, and the vibe and the story and the reaction. I'll say the reactions I had no doubt in my mind that we were going to deliver. And it's unique to hear Wade that take on it, so to speak, that if there's one thing, and look, maybe I'm in the dark and maybe I was delusional and not reading it, but I felt that I could have a match with Sparkplug, Bob Holly, Adam Bomb, Doink, Dink, Razor, Kevin, Shawn, Bam Bam, 1, 2, 3 kid. I felt I had good to really good matches with all of them. And being in the ring with Scott, there was many a night that I felt, obviously we had a lot of TV time to build it, but we tore the house down. If it's not the best match on the card, it's certainly ranked right up there.
So I want to ask about the little comment he has here.
Lack of bump taking.
Yeah. Like, did he think you weren't, did you hear that criticism ever? Or is this the first time you're hearing it?
I mean, if there's one thing as a heel, or as a babyface either, I don't think I've ever been accused of no selling or not selling.
To be clear, I read that as bumping and feeding. Was that the way you read it?
Oh, that's yeah. I mean, the other day there was a clip, and shout out to Marcus on social media. He goes, "Damn, dude, what a bump and feed guy you were." And I said, "Is that the first time you've seen that?" Yeah. I mean, okay, I'll say this. That's one thing Kevin and Scott liked as them being the baby faces, is that me and Shawn flat back,
up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down.
They could just stay in one place.
Yeah.
Just stay in one place.
So the punch oriented style. I mean, here's the thing. All I've ever heard is that Jerry Lawler has the best punch in the history of wrestling. I don't know. Chat me up. What do you make of this criticism from your boy Wade? Punch oriented style didn't gel well.
And this is where we have a lot of fun with Dave or Wade, or whoever it may be. Their job was to sell newsletters, specifically in this era.
You never had any guys say, "I don't want to take these less punches. We're doing too many punches."
Never.
I don't understand how guys just make shit up.
I mean, I'm going to go back and defend Wade and Dave. They're selling newsletters, so they got to write a little something controversial to knock me, to make it interesting reading, to have their viewers say, "Hey, Wade, you're full of shit," or, "Oh, yeah, you know what? Jeff does throw too many punches, and he does bump too much in the ring, or he doesn't bump enough in there." Whatever it is, it's nonsense. But
let me ask this. I'll give some context here, because this is going to be maybe uncomfortable, maybe not. But
Conrad, if you bring up Desperate Housewives one more time,
I won't. I promise.
Okay.
Not today anyway, but next week you're getting it again. your dad, and you guys have had a complicated relationship. I got a ton of DMs about our conversation last week, and that we sort of took a hard right turn, but had really good conversation about your dad and just family relationships and all that jazz.
I got feedback too. Well, I'll share with you at some point.
I want to tell you, or I want to ask you rather, this era is where on the other channel, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage are starting to kick the shit out of WWF. Now, the 83 week thing is not yet happening, right? Because there is no Monday Nitro. That's going to happen later in the year. But all of a sudden, from a licensing standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, we've always associated Macho Man and Hulk Hogan with the WWF, and now they're on the WCW side of things. Well, supposedly, Eric Bischoff is asking, hey, what can we do to really level this thing up? What should we be doing? Da, 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 da. He freestyles this to his new business partner, Mr. Terry Bollea, who we know as Hulk Hogan. And he says, brother, call JArrett. And your dad, while you're the Intercontinental Champion, working out in Times Square, about to be taking on Razor Ramon at WrestleMania, one of the biggest moments of your career, your dad takes a consulting gig with WCW. And at the time, he was actually still on Vince McMahon's payroll. Now, your dad had told Vince a long time ago, stop paying me. Of course, we famously remember that your dad was involved and he was Vince's right-hand man for a bit in case, what if, and certain people have denied that, but still, your dad was in regular communication and was paying him. But now he's taking the paycheck from WCW and he calls and says, Vince, I just want to tell you again, you should stop sending these checks. I'm actually working for Turner's outfit, and those checks stopped coming. But it almost felt as if, and I'm not saying wrestling is mafioso or whatever, but it almost felt like, was one of the head of the families, if you will, McMahon was essentially just paying your dad tribute when he kept floating those checks. Hey, you had my back and you were there when I needed you, so here you go. But now he's switching jerseys and he's going to take the check somewhere else. And this comes out and is in the newsletters and people are talking about it right before your big moment at WrestleMania. When did you find out that your dad was going to take a consulting gig with WCW? And how did you think that was going to affect you at all, or if at all, in the WWF?
Well, he didn't tell me.
Oh, how did you find out?
Through backstage talk. I can't put a finger on any one person, but and you've sort of laid it out, and not that I had serious mixed emotions in that I knew things didn't end well with Pat and Bruce and the work environment. And
they took it personally that your dad was there. They felt job scared or threatened by his presence. He's not going to come in and be our boss. They ribbed him really hard and basically made him miserable up there. And boy, he was probably not loving Connecticut compared to, and again, just to add context. And I realized that, you know, we're maybe beating a dead horse, but your dad's used to living in, I don't know, 15,000 square feet of luxury in a hometown where he's celebrated and has a bunch of acreage and knows everybody. And it's truly home. And now he's cramped into a, I don't know, 900 square foot corporate apartment. This probably sucks for a country boy who's used to living on the land and on the lake. And now he's got guys fucking with his shit and he's not really in power and he's trying to be helpful. But as an older fellow, he's crammed his life into a 900 square foot apartment, and he just really wants to be home, because the whole time he was home, by the way, he was in charge. So he was not a cog in the wheel. He was the boss.
And like myself, and I can relate to this much more now than back then, my little brother Jason was the captain. I mean, he was in his junior and senior year of high school football.
Yeah.
And my dad absolutely loved that. He would drive home on weekends to watch a game and drive back. That's a Connecticut to Nashville and back is a haul.
It's a commitment and a half.
Yeah. So it was, but now as a young 27, 28-year-old,
You ain't thinking about that. You're thinking about, Dad, this is my time. And
bingo. What world revolved around Jeff? I'm the IC champ. I'm doing this. I'm doing that.
how dare you? Yeah.
And you're doing what?
Yeah.
But I can't say that I had like really like long thoughts of it. As like, oh my God. And so with our relationship from the time I can remember, it was always a roller coaster. So this was one of those loop-de-loops that, you know, and whether it was the boys or my first wife or other family members or whatever it is, there was a lot of chatter and a lot of noise. And look, I can tell of this today of a character flaw. I just suppressed it. Oh, that's not going on. That's not going on. And, you know, and Cornette has said it, you know, being the son of a promoter is either the biggest blessing or the biggest curse. And I kind of took it as, well, you know, my dad gave me a great opportunity to get in this business, and he was in this business first. So he's going to go, I can't fault him for that. But man, the timing of it sucked. And I did not think it was a coincidence. I'm like, dadgummit.
Wait, you felt like your dad was doing it on purpose?
Well, not on purpose. That's what, but just maybe not on purpose. It was just like, dadgum. Just, and look, he was getting into developing home. I mean, you know, he had other business ventures. He jumped ship. And it made me feel uneasy. And I can remember Bruce specifically, Pat too, and Vince, a very brief conversation. One, but it was Jeff, this will not affect you. But Bruce kind of multiple times, like, Jeff, this ain't going to affect you at all. I probably made a lot bigger deal out of it in my mind for a short window, but it definitely weighed on my mind.
Here we are, WrestleMania 11, Hartford Civic Center, 15,000 fans here on hand, jam-packed to the rafters. Do you remember what you did the night before?
That was this is where, boy, times have changed, but that was where the Fan Fest was just getting started. I think they actually called it WWF Fan Fest. And me and Roadie, I wore that silver outfit. And I mean, we had appearances and media and maybe a banquet. We did all kinds of WrestleMania activities. I can remember checking into the hotel, maybe in Hartford, maybe that was a Thursday, maybe even a Wednesday. I mean, I can remember me and Brian, you know, because me and Brian shared rooms on the road. But, you know, you get to Mania, everybody's got their own room, and it was a big deal. I mean, it was the big show, a big deal. We're in a good spot. Me and Brian were having the time of our life. I'll tell you that much.
So here we are. You're the second match on the show. When did you find out how much time you had, who your agent was, what your card was, like where you were placement wise? Do you know all that the day before, the week before, the day of?
We arrived up there, the talk, but look, when you have Scott as your opponent, you know, I deferred to him he was the lead, you know, he would give me information. Hey, I think we're doing this or doing that, or, you know, him and Pat had a really good relationship. And so I got my information, the majority of it from Scott, maybe Kevin or Sean, but the majority, you know, this match would have come from Scott and what we're doing. And here's what they're thinking, but we'll figure out who our agent is. But I want to say when we arrived in Hartford, the news, you know, the information began to be disseminated.
So when do you and Scott start to actually put together the match? Is this something, as you guys are, I mean, you know, the match is, it's not like it snuck up on you. And I know that you've worked a lot of matches in house shows. So do you sit down with him the day of, a week out, and say, hey, remember that thing we did in Poughkeepsie? What if we started with that and blah, blah, blah?
When as the week or two out, maybe 3 weeks out, as we're knowing we're headed to Mania, we're like, okay, come back through the curtain after a live event match, house show match, and we're like, hey, at Mania, we're going to start that way, and then we're going to go into this. And we just sort of footnote it, okay, on to the next town. Hey, when we get to Mania, this is the heat spot, and we're going to do this and this. And if we have enough time, we're adding this. So we already had, let's just say, the entire buffet. When we got to Mania, all we had to do was fix our plate. It was really that we had A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I mean, we had a whole smorgasbord of spots and nuances and piecing this together and piecing that together. Let's find out how much time we have. And from however much time we have, we'll back time the finish, and then we'll make this pot of soup, go eat it.
Here's what it's written to say here. This is Meltzer's recap. Razor Ramon beat Jeff Jarrett by DQ in 13 minutes and 32 seconds. So Jarrett retained the IC title. 1, 2, 3 Kid came out with Ramon to counter Roadie. Ramon got the early advantage, but set up the Razor's edge. But Roadie pulled Jarrett out of the ring by his legs for safety. Jarrett tried to run away to the locker room, but Kid blocked him, chased him back into the ring. Jarrett took over for 3 minutes until a collision. Ramon once again took over, scoring several near falls. At one point, Kid tried to crotch Jarrett on the ring post, but Jarrett kicked him and he crashed at the security railing. At 10:28, Ramon missed a leapfrog off the top rope and quote unquote injured his knee. Jarrett put the figure 4 on, but Ramon reversed it. Kid helped Ramon add leverage to the hold, but the ref caught him and forced Ramon to break the hold. Ramon superplexed Jarrett and set him up for the Razor's edge, but Roadie did a run in, clipping Ramon's knee for the DQ finish. Kid ran in for the save, nailing both with spin kicks, one of which gave Jarrett a legit bloody nose. The heels came back and Jarrett locked the figure 4 on Kid until Rene Goulet and several referees broke it up. Good match with a bad finish. Meltzer gave it 2 3/4 stars. Wade liked it a little better. He gave it 3 stars. What did you think? Were you happy with it when you come back through the curtain? Did you accomplish all that you set out to?
You know, it just dawned on me. You said Wade gave it a higher rating, but most of the time he gives them lower ratings, doesn't he?
That's true. Yes, yeah. Sir.
How about that little my world statistic today? You know, coming through the curtain, it was. I had high expectations, and I felt like everything clicked. Like the bloody nose, he knocked the crap out of me. But it was Kid, and it happens. I knew it was a good one. You know, it wasn't a little soft tap, but everything clicked. Everything it gelled. You know, I'll never forget Scott coming through the curtain and the roar and the pop he had. You know, when we came out, me and Brian had heat. They booed us. It was just a good presentation, and Brian playing the part of Roadie so well, which just added to that whole story of the country music singer. And he, you know, at this point I'd been there a year and a half, and the build to it. And here is this Southern talking, smack talking dude with a Roadie, and they kicked our guy's ass at the Royal Rumble, the bad guy, and now he's getting his redemption because, by God, his little buddy 1, 2, 3 Kid is in his corner. Just the table was set right, and the people responded like you think they would. And it was, you know, it was came through the curtain. It was very well received backstage.
If you had it to do over again, like now that you can use your promoter hat, your booking hat, should you have dropped the belt back to Razor here?
Well, because ultimately we kind of knew where we were going.
I just say that because you kind of assumed after the Royal Rumble when you won, well, I'm going to drop it back to him at Mania.
Here's in my mind that I always thought Scott didn't need to win the belt again.
Yeah.
And it helped Double J by retaining at Mania. Nobody called it. Nobody called that. They just didn't. Even with 1, 2, 3 Kid in the corner. Oh, wow. Double J. That to me was another, like, just a massive vote of confidence from Vince and his team. Hey, we're going with this guy.
Yeah.
We are absolutely. I mean, at Mania, it was just a big deal. It was a really big deal and a vote of confidence that we're going with this act. We're not taking the belt off of him at Mania.
Any hurt feelings with the bloody nose? That spin kick looked pretty brutal.
It was no, none. Again, just me and Sean had worked together a boatload of times. We were all, again, just the passion for the industry. That's the last thing that I would get upset about. And it's, it just happened. And it's Mania. Of course he's going to be high energy.
Scott's happy with the match. Vince is happy with the match. You're happy with the match.
Well, everybody was really happy. And when you look back and when maybe this is me putting my promoter cap on, but when you watch Road Dogg as a roadie, not a manager, not a mouthpiece, but he really was a second. But my God, he was a scene stealer when you put him in different positions. We had 4 guys in that match. Yes, it was a singles match, but everything Kid did and everything Roadie did really meant something. And Scott's the orchestra that, as we went into all that, Scott really had the ultimate say in the match, if you will, that if we're going to do a little something, Kid and Road Dogg and myself, we weren't going to say, hey, no, Scott, we are going to do it this way. We deferred to him. He was, as you said, he was in the ladder match the year before, and he had been there, and he came in as Razor Ramon and the Savage program and how much merchandise Scott was selling. And, that's a whole nother conversation that Scott was the guy. Merch sales, he was during this run, Kevin, and we know that they flipped him babyface off of Sean's Bodyguard. Nobody was selling as much merch. It was Brett and Scott. In a lot of ways, in the European tours, I mean, Scott was the guy. He was the top, when I say this, true babyface. I don't think you could put Kevin. He was Big Daddy Cool, but he was the guy and the orchestra. And so, yeah, everybody was happy.
Let's talk about WrestleMania 11 as a whole. What did you think of the rest of the card? You had Diesel retaining his title over Shawn Michaels. Brett beat Bob Backlund in an I Quit match. Roddy Piper's the special guest referee. LT beats Bam Bam. Did your first WrestleMania live up to your expectations? And what did you think of the rest of the card?
Chris Spielman was one of the football players that I got to chat a little bit with during that day. I found him fascinating, but they had a separate dressing room for all the football players, but those guys ended up coming in and talking. And I do remember meeting Mongo for the first time, but when you look at kind of the lineup of that card, you just kind of almost glossed over a 27-year-old kid, Double J from Hendersonville, and Roddy Piper is in an I Quit match. Now, go back 10 years in the first couple of WrestleManias when I'm sitting on my dad's couch in a massive, what those big satellites called, whatever they were, but just
links or whatever they are.
It's just those huge, anyway, C-band. Anyway, Piper on this card, legendary football players, LT and Bam Bam. Again, Bam Bam, a guy who came through Memphis, wasn't there long, but immediately main event, and he had gone off to Japan, and he had main events, Saturday night main events, and this and that, and he's taking on LT. It was a huge deal. And so being a part, Memphis, most of the time they were 2-match cards. It's just kind of how it was. It was Lawler, a lot of times 1-match cards, but now all of a sudden you have, as we just went down, LT in a match, Bret Hart, Diesel, Razor is a big card. And you think about, and pay-per-view had such a different connotation back then, Conrad. It was in your, still quasi early fandom. Pay-per-view, would you say had a different, when you heard pay-per-view back in those days, in your brain, for me, a different bell rung than it does now.
Yeah.
It's now it's transactional, or the Apple generation, I call it the Apple Wallet generation. Back in those days, you had Tyson, You had Holyfield, you had Hearns, and
it wasn't as easily accessible. You know,
yeah.
Back then you had to drive to your cable system the day before and get a little thing on the back of your TV. And
that's what I'm saying. It's just a different deal.
You can't click a button and it's there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's talk about some questions here, because Lord knows we got a ton of them. Cowboy Arrogance on Twitter wants to know, based on everything I've heard, Pamela Anderson was stoned out of her mind at WrestleMania. Did you have any interaction with her backstage that night?
No, I had none. And, you know, I don't know that anybody had a lot. I mean, she did the pre-tapes and all that kind of stuff, but no, I had zero interaction.
The Happy Hour podcast says, with Bam Bam and LT headlining, wouldn't you think that Bam Bam would have gotten a much deserved main event spot afterwards? That dude carried LT through that like a champ. I don't have any reason why he couldn't have been a main eventer to begin with. All around great talent. You and I are both big Bam Bam Bigelow fans. Were you surprised they didn't do more with him after that?
Here's why I know. No, I wasn't. Just my upbringing and this was impressed upon from Lawler and my dad mainly. It's kind of irrelevant what you do bell to bell. If you can't welcome in the building, Austin Idol was there last night. I got to share a couple of podcast stories and conversations. But, you know, Idol, to me, as a kid, him and Fargo were the guys. Of course, Lawler, they could talk him in the building. That's what really mattered. Bam Bam never really never got in the groove of cutting a promo.
Matt says, did Jeff prefer his Rumble match with Razor or this one?
Ooh, good question.
I mean, on the one hand, you win at Rumble and you win the IC title, but on the other hand, you retain by DQ. Maybe the finish isn't as rewarding, but it's Wrestle freaking Mania.
I'd have to tip my cap to the Mania one. And the reason why, I don't think people gave me and Roadie a snowball's chance in hell at Rumble. So it was a shocking finish. Oh my God, he went over. Yeah. This isn't just, you know, at Mania, I'm walking in the champ and then to walk out the champ with that reaction and the kid and Road Dogg around it. I like the Mania match better.
Here's another question from Matt. He had two really good ones. How did Jeff feel about more than usual photographers at ringside? It seems like it really bugged Sean later in the night. There was a lot of celebrity interaction, and as a result, tons of press credentials issued. It even felt like it straight up pissed off Sean. Do you remember that being an issue for you?
Well, not for me. I can remember the agents and the discussion, and there are going to be a lot of photographers out there. And I know that they're, from an aesthetic point of view, I'm just like, why are you going to let them out there? Well, it looks good on TV. They're covering an event. It's like a sporting event. It's like a boxing. You know, you see Hagler and Hearns, and there's 50 people around ringside all snapping up photos. It gives it that big fight feel. Well, Sean's point was, we're not boxing, folks. I'm going outside the ring. I don't know what corner I'm going to come out of. It just is a different era. So there was two sides to that discussion.
Well, I'm not really sure how we end today's episode. I know we talked a lot about Scott Hall at the top, and I know we're going to talk about Lance Russell next week. I do want to mention something else, though, that I feel like we should, I don't know, celebrate a little bit. You and I and a lot of the guys we do podcasts with, we got together and we made the decision to really push and promote something that is near and dear to all of us, St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And we've decided to donate 100%, and I mean every nickel of the proceeds from our t-shirt sales this year directly to St. Jude's. You can see these shirts at adfreecares.com. That's going to take you directly to Pro Wrestling Tees. So it's prowrestlingtees.com/adfreecares, or just go to adfreecares.com. You'll see all the great shirts that we've talked about here in this last year or so with My World with Jeff Jarrett. We've lowered the price on all the shirts. All the shirts are cheaper than ever, $17.99, but 100% of the proceeds, and I mean every bit of it, goes directly to St. Jude's. This is something that's near and dear to both you and I, and we've both got a history of working with St. Jude's, but this is pretty cool, man. Now, not only do our listeners get a really cool shirt and get to support their favorite podcast, but it all goes to a tremendous cause, St. Jude's. How cool is this, man?
Conrad, this is whether it's my OCD or just how my brain, I'll never forget, in the evenings, when I'm not on the road, I go out walking around here, right?
Yep.
And all of a sudden I'm on my walk and a little Conrad Thompson comes up on my phone. And I go, okay, a little late in the day. He wants some. Hey, and Conrad, when you started sort of rolling out, hey, what do you, and I just, before you could finish, in my mind, I'm going, and so folks, hats off to Conrad. The mailbox that the house and mailbox I was walking by, when you finally shut up, I said, could you go, well, what do you think? And I'm like, absolutely. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that I have radically changed in my life, that give. And so I encourage anybody, hell, get a shirt that knocks me. Jeff doesn't like the Sopranos, but he likes stuff. I don't care. No, but it's really, Conrad, hats off to the entire team and Eric and that group text. And hey, what's everybody think? We have talked to everybody, and there was a group text, and just want to make sure this is where, everybody chimed in. Yes, Conrad, we're all for it. And you'd already asked us, but you guys were making sure that we were going through this one more time. This is the decision we're making, folks. All proceeds, and we all unanimously said, "Yep, let's do it."
We really hope you check it out. First of all, we'd appreciate if you were sporting a shirt around, in public or at a wrestling event or whatever, or just around the house or on the lake or what have you, to the gym that has our podcast logo. Hey man, that's cool. But at the same time, how cool is it to know that 100% of the proceeds, nothing goes to Jeff, nothing goes to Conrad. Every nickel goes directly to St. Jude's. It's a shirt that you can feel good about wearing. And it's also cheaper than everything we've ever sold before. It's adfreecares.com. That's adfreecares.com. It'll take you directly to Pro Wrestling Tees. 100% goes directly to St. Jude's. And we're glad to have the association. And I want to mention, we're doing some fun stuff over at adfreeshows.com right now. We just recently had a little special moment, if you will, to celebrate WrestleMania 18. The Rock and Hulk Hogan created magic that night. The third man in the ring was Mr. Mike Chioda. The guy who wrote the lyrics to the beautiful music that those guys made was Mr. Jim Ross. Jim Ross and Mike Chioda watched that match, celebrated that match, broke it down, shared some inside baseball, some behind the scenes stories they've never told before. It's all available at adfreeshows.com. And coming up later this week with JR, we'll be talking about WrestleMania 13. It's WrestleMania season. Everybody's talking about WrestleMania right now, Jeff. And I think we're probably going to do a little more of that with ad-free shows as we get ready for you and I to head out to Dallas and do our thing at Gillies, supershowlive.com. Jeff Hardy, Eric Bischoff, William Regal, Jeff Jarrett, and myself all on stage. The pre-show meet and greet, the happy hour, if you will, is the place to be. I'm looking forward to being in Dallas, and I'm looking forward next week, Jeff, to talk about Lance Russell. I know that was the plan today, but I felt like with everything happening with Scott Hall, today was a worthwhile pivot.
For sure. I got to watch the JR Chioda. I got to watch that, but no. And you just rolled out Hardy and Regal. Pal, we have another surprise, and maybe another one, and maybe another one. No, Friday, April 1st. Don't be a fool. We're going to have a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of fun. And Cassio, is he coming?
Oh yeah. Cassio will be there.
Good. I'm going to smack this shit up. No, kidding.
Looking forward to it. Boys and girls, get your tickets, make it happen. Supershowlive.com. April 1st will be here before you know it. And next week, man, me and you, Lance Russell, right here on My World.
Peace.